Chapter 2541. The mysterious snake's life was already on the line due to her refinement. Needless to say, its power had greatly increased. But at the same time, if the mysterious snake collapsed, she would also be seriously injured. It was just that before this, she never thought that she would collapse. Because there were no foreign monarchs in the Kurfürst Road, his strength could be said to have reached the peak. As long as he didn't provoke those evildoers and monsters, he could basically be said to be invincible. But she didn't expect to encounter such a monster. He had actually beaten her mysterious snake to the brink of collapse. She was still in a daze. Although it was only for a moment, she was caught by Yi Shiwen. He took a step forward, penetrated through the space, and directly appeared in front of the old woman. A sword light appeared in his hand, and a horizontal slash was made. Ah! The old woman screamed. Her reaction was too slow. She only had enough time to dodge a little. A small half of her body was directly chopped by Yi Shiwen and was directly smashed. Her blood splashed and turned into a blood mist that pervaded the air. The old woman retreated back to her companions. She looked at Yi Shiwen with an incomparably horrified expression in her eyes. It could be said that she had been careless earlier, but now she had clearly used all of her strength. But she had still been abused by Yi Shiwen. The blood-colored sword aura was too fierce, and the evil aura attached to it was too terrifying. She'd been hiding in Dusk Snake's body when they'd exchanged blows, but she'd still been affected. This was inconceivable to her. Having cultivated to this level, it could be said that she had experienced mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Her mind was unusually firm, and even the evil spirit of an ancient battlefield had no effect on her. But she was affected by the evil spirit of the sword chi, as if she had really seen a hell, and she had fallen into that hell forever. That scene was really too frightening. Now that she thought about it, she still felt unusually terrified. What kind of magic tool is he using? How can it be so powerful? Everyone was thinking about this question, especially the other experts. Although they were confident in their own strength, they wouldn't say that they could heavily injure the old woman in such a short period of time. That wasn't something that could be described with just strength. They were also very clear that he should have used that mysterious magic tool, but they also could not think of any magic tool that could do this. Perhaps even a top-grade magic tool could not do this. You are really too useless. You can't even deal with a junior. That foxy woman giggled and said, "If you have the ability, then do it." The old woman continued to repair the half of her body that had been cut off and said in a bad mood. If she was in her previous peak state, she would definitely let her know why the flowers were so red. But now, she did not have the mood to do so. Everyone be careful. This guy is not simple, and that celestial device of his is worth being extra careful. At that moment, the golden-winged sky howling lion spoke up. He had seen it clearly from the side just now. The sword chi was truly sharp and terrifying. Even with his level of cultivation, he did not want to take on that kind of sword chi head-on. Ta-ta-ta. Yi Shiwen held the broken sky sword in his hand and walked over step by step. It seemed as if he had completely ignored these people. His expression was indifferent, and the tip of his sword was still dripping with golden blood. The golden blood dripped down and was quickly absorbed by the earth. Little brother, if you continue to walk forward, then don't blame me for being impolite. The charming woman smiled charmingly and said. Yi Shiwen just looked at her coldly and said, "If you want to attack, then attack together. Don't talk nonsense. Little brother, don't force yourself. You should not feel good activating that kind of celestial device. Now, you still have some combat power left. It is not too late to retreat now. Today, your performance is enough to shock the world. If you go back and practice for a few more years, you may be able to reach the peak," the charming woman said with a smile. She did not get angry because of Yi Shiwen's words. "I think it should be enough to kill a few more of them," Yi Shiwen said coldly. "Why are you talking nonsense with him? This kid is very strange. Let's join forces and attack him directly." At this time, the purple-clothed middle-aged man could not bear it anymore. Yi Shiwen did not want to delay, naturally because there might be more masters coming from behind. They were also the same. Anyway, they only wanted the blood essence of the Kuan Peng. They could leave after taking the blood essence. Who cared about the flood after his death? Boom! A burst of purple light overflowed from the purple-clothed, middle-aged man's body. The whole world trembled under the eruption of his vital energy. It was unknown when a spear had appeared in his hand. This spear was exuding endless blood energy. It was unknown how many people he had killed to form such a shocking blood energy. Whoosh! The spear broke through the air and attacked straight towards Yi Shiwen. It was covered with endless god laws. In an instant, it expanded and turned into a divine kingdom. He was going to directly suppress Yi Shiwen with a divine kingdom. Boom! Wherever the tip of the spear passed, the world rumbled and shattered into pieces. Clang! In an instant, Yi Shiwen's sword light slashed out horizontally and collided with the spear fiercely. Boom! After a terrible collision, the energy formed a ball and swept in all directions. Suddenly, the middle-aged man clearly felt a frighteningly ferocious aura spread out and directly entered his mind. In his mind, it turned into a huge Avicii hell and actually wanted to affect him. He was startled and quickly suppressed the evil aura. In an instant, it was almost suppressed. He was suddenly shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. He had only watched the old woman fight and did not feel it directly. However, when he really fought with her, he really felt the terrible impact of this fierce energy. Logically speaking, with his mind, any ghostly thing that dared to rush into his divine sense would be instantly suppressed. It was impossible for it to cause any impact. However, this fierce energy had done it. What was going on? However, he didn't have time to think about it. He didn't know when a sharp sword had appeared in the middle of his lower abdomen. He was stunned for a short moment. Yi Shiwen seized this moment and pierced the space-breaking sword into his body. Ah! The purple-clothed, middle-aged man screamed and retreated again and again. He had been seriously injured by the sword. The endless evil chi rushed into his body along with the sword chi. Although he hadn't been stabbed to death, he had been seriously injured in an instant. The evil chi was affecting all aspects of his body, which was equivalent to losing his combat strength. Many people looked at this scene in shock. Such combat power was so powerful that it was terrifying to destroy two experts at the peak of the Sage Realm. On the other hand, the Grand Elder of Ink Cloud City, who was in battle with a desolate beast puppet in the distance, unintentionally swept his gaze over this scene, and he couldn't help but feel fortunate. Fortunately, I've invited a few helpers this time. Otherwise, Ink Cloud City would really be overturned by this fellow that I didn't take seriously at the beginning. The City Lord of Cloud Ink City did not fail miserably. This was basically a vast sea. Where was the sewer? It was normal to fail miserably. The situation in the field had suddenly become confusing to everyone. Although there were 3 people left on the other side, it was very likely that Yi Shiwen would be able to severely injure a few more deities at the pinnacle of the Sage Realm, judging from how he had severely injured 2 deities at the pinnacle of the Sage Realm. Perhaps they really would not be able to stop him. There are 3 more. Do you plan to come at me together or die one by one? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. If one looked carefully, they could still see that Yi Shiwen's eyes were a bit bloodshot. He looked abnormally indifferent. He was also faintly affected by the Avicii sword chi, which stimulated the fierceness of the star beast bloodline in his body. Such a fierce sword was itself a double-edged sword. To hurt others, it would hurt oneself first. Without the Mingxin ancient tree to stabilize his mind, he could only rely on the mysterious space to barely keep his mind from being lost. If it were an ordinary person, he would have already gone crazy after so many sword strikes. God, is he really planning to fight 1 against 3? It's too terrifying. Fortunately, we did not go up and do anything. Otherwise, I don't know what will happen to us. At first, I thought that he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and came to die. Now, it seems that this is not the case at all. Yes, he did not even bat an eyelid when facing 5 peak divine lords. He is certainly not an ordinary person. But why have I not heard of him before? I'm afraid this person will really be blacklisted by the major forces in the future. If you encounter this person, it is best to run away. Many people were shocked when they saw this scene. At first, many people wanted to scheme for some benefits. Now that they saw that he really dared to attack, everyone suddenly lost such thoughts. He was simply a monster. Kid, you are too arrogant. Do you really think that you can resist the three of us? The black-robed old man finally could not stand it anymore and roared angrily. Yi Shiwen's arrogant attitude had completely enraged him. The dignity of a divine lord at the peak of the sage realm could not be blasphemed. His whole body exuded a peerless, murderous aura. This murderous aura condensed into countless phantoms of the killing path behind him, causing the space to collapse in an instant. All of a sudden, the world turned into a kingdom of the killing path. The laws of heaven and earth were torn apart in an instant by the impact. The black-robed old man blasted a fist at Yi Shiwen. The fist incarnation had completely condensed and fused together, and boundless, murderous aura swept out. Walala! The fist force tore a huge crack in the sky wherever it passed, and it spread towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not choose to take it head-on. His power was all in the Avicii sword chi, so he did not choose to take it head-on. Whoosh! He disappeared with a stride, and that shockingly powerful fist aura pierced right through Yi Shiwen's body. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the black-robed old man, and his sword slashed down. Chapter 2542. Yi Shiwen's sword momentum was amazing. As Yi Shiwen's sword slashed down, there were explosions everywhere. The old man retreated again and again, not daring to take Yi Shiwen's sword head-on. Two masters had suffered losses in a row. How could they not pay attention? The sword momentum collided with the old man's fist momentum. There were explosions everywhere, and there was no sign of it stopping at all. When the energy rolled back, the Tianyuan mirror on Yi Shiwen's body constantly burst with blood-red light, absorbing the aftermath of the energy. Although he did not want to take on these people head-on, the aftermath of the explosion could not hurt his foundation. Let's see how long you can last. I don't believe that an eternal realm, like you can fight for a long time with such combat power. The old man said coldly. Even if you can fight for a long time, it will be useless. Today, you will die without a doubt. The old man was completely enraged by Yi Shiwen. At the same time, his eyes were full of fighting spirit. The dignity of a divine lord could not be challenged. Let's join forces and kill him. We'll split the things on him equally. How about that? The charming woman said fiercely. At this moment, she did not look charming and delicate at all. Her eyes were like a wolf's, and she was extremely greedy for the things on Yi Shiwen's body. So far, Yi Shiwen had brought out too many good things. The wild beast puppet that was comparable to the pinnacle of the sage plane was one thing, but the blood-colored sword aura that allowed Yi Shiwen to be comparable to the pinnacle of the sage plane was also extraordinary. How could she not see that this was probably a monster who was growing up and had a lot of good things on him? Otherwise, he would not have such amazing combat power. The old man's eyes flashed with amazing light. To be able to obtain the treasures on Yi Shiwen seemed to be no less than obtaining the essence and blood of the Kuanping. Good, kill him. The old man in black clothes burst with infinite power and directly punched out. In an instant, wherever his fist passed, endless murderous aura manifested. This murderous aura directly turned into dozens of powerful killing generals. These people exuded terrifying murderous aura and united into a shocking killing matrix. This was also a direct manifestation of the old man's martial arts. He had simply killed his way through the battlefield of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. This move was far more powerful than the others. That punch would have been able to split even an ordinary sage at the pinnacle of the sage plane in half. These slaughtered generals rushed over and directly surrounded Yi Shiwen. Each of them displayed a kind of matchless martial arts and bombarded towards Yi Shiwen. These were all powerful killing moves formed from the remnant souls and resentment of the experts who had died at the hands of the black-robed old man. They could even use powerful martial arts from when they were alive. This killing array had ground the sky into powder. It wanted to kill Yi Shiwen. Not bad. Yi Shiwen opened the eye of redemption and saw everything. Therefore, he knew very well how terrifying this move was. An ordinary sage realm expert at the peak would not be able to resist it. Yishuin did not think about blocking it. The light wings on his back spread out, and his entire body swayed. He had already disappeared into the sky, evading the fatal attack of the killing array. The sky breaker sword in his hand pointed in the sky, and a sword aura swept down, pouncing towards the old man. Yishuin's sword aura was much more powerful than before. At this time, he had even integrated his martial arts incarnation into it. It was just that under his powerful aura, others could not feel it at all. The brilliant sword aura shot up into the sky, bursting with endless sword aura. The sword aura was like a pillar of light, and it crashed into the killing array. Ah! 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 The slaughter generals screamed one after another, and they were completely annihilated in the sword aura. How can this sword aura be so powerful? The black-robed old man was shocked, and he was almost cut by Yishuin's sword aura. Yishuin's sword aura was too sharp, especially that fierce aura, which made even the old man's expression change at the mention of it. "Little brother, you're not allowed to do whatever you want here." The charming woman giggled, and a long pink whip slashed down with an astonishing light. Yishuin had no time to react, and he only had time to backhand and block it with his sword. Bang! The sword aura and the long pink whip directly collided, and the sword aura was smashed into pieces in the air. However, the fierce aura followed the long whip and directly leaped in front of the charming woman. This fierce aura transformed into many terrifying things in the air, and it went straight into people's hearts. The charming woman finally realized why the sword aura was difficult to deal with. The sword aura itself was indeed enough to pose a threat to them, but what was more troublesome was the fierce aura attached to the sword aura. She had practiced martial arts for hundreds of thousands of years, and she had never seen such a troublesome instrument. Most importantly, she was even more afraid that Yishuin would bring out the main body of the instrument if he was forced into a corner. Just the sword aura was so terrifying. If he brought out the main body, how terrifying would it be? She simply did not dare to imagine. On the other side, the golden-winged sky roaring lion was staring at him like a tiger watching its prey, and Yishuin did not dare to use his full strength. Very quickly, the three of them reached a consensus. The old man's expression calmed down, but his actions caused many people to suck in a breath of cold air. He was releasing an extremely dangerous aura, a burning aura. His life source was actually burning. The combat power of his entire body had actually increased again, and he was like an eternal god king with no limits. My God, he's actually starting to burn his life source. Even those at the peak of the sage plane are beginning to feel the threat of this purple-robed young man. Everyone was shocked. They knew very well that gods wouldn't burn their own life source unless they had no other choice. Even if it was a god, doing so would injure their life source, and it would take a long time for them to recover. The old man took one step at a time, seemingly slow, but actually fast. In an instant, he was in front of Yishuin, and he blasted out a punch. His whole body seemed to be burning with flames. Space froze and was sealed in an instant. There was no one who could escape from this punch. This was the consensus of the three. They could not give Yishuin a chance to summon the main body of the ritual implement. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yishuin immediately felt danger when he blasted out this punch. Compared to the old man's attack before, it was simply several times stronger, almost overturning the peak of power in this plane. Clang! Yishuin took a few steps back, but the momentum of the punch did not decrease. On the contrary, it was getting stronger and stronger. A phantom of a roulette suddenly appeared on his body, wrapping him in it. The aura of tens of thousands of magic spells flew out, forming a long whip of laws, forming a huge network in front of him. Boom! The fist blasted into the network formed by the long whip of laws, and the powerful force directly tore the network to pieces. Then, the remaining power directly blasted into the phantom of the roulette. Rumble! Endless explosions exploded in an instant. For a moment, no other sound could be heard, and no other scene could be seen. They could only see this scene. The light of the explosion engulfed everything, and engulfed both of them. This is too strong. More than half of Cloud Ink City was razed to the ground. Looking from afar, it was extremely shocking. Both sides had already done their best. Clang! With a loud sword hum, a blood-colored sword chi split open the sky, killing its way out from the endless shockwaves of the explosion. Then, everyone saw that this blood-colored sword chi was 10 times stronger than before. It disappeared in an instant, and when it reappeared, it had pierced through the void. Ah! However, they only heard a miserable shriek. When they heard it, they realized that it was not the voice of the black-clothed old man. After that, all the smoke and dust dissipated, and they clearly saw that the black-clothed old man had been blasted into a bloody mist in midair. All the things on his body burst out, but they were all collected by Yi Shiwen's big hand. However, Yi Shiwen's current situation did not look good. His face was pale, and his entire arm was dripping with blood. Golden blood was constantly dripping from the wound. Moreover, the wound on his arm was not just a little bit. There were tiny cracks on almost every part of his arm. Originally, it was already very difficult for his arm to pass through the Avicii sword aura. Just now, he increased the absorption of the Avicii sword aura, and his arm almost exploded. The meridians in his entire arm were already in a mess. All the power in his body had been almost drained. The cost of using the 10,000 spell roulette and the Avicii sword at the same time was too great. The purple lotus flame in his body had gone through a series of battles, and only a little more than a third of it was left. One could imagine the huge consumption. Fortunately, he did not end up empty-handed. All the wealth on the old man in black had been taken by Yi Shiwen. He counted silently and found that there was actually more than 10 billion. Experts at the peak of the Sage Plane who had cultivated for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years were indeed rich. Especially since they could not cultivate to the titled king level, their consumption would not increase. Such accumulation over the years was probably even richer than some titled king level experts who consumed a lot. However, it was a pity that there were no top-notch treasures like the fire essence. But then again, if there were, he would have consumed it long ago. But even so, Yi Shiwen was very satisfied. However, at that moment, everyone was still completely shocked. The peak of the Sage Plane, a divine master at the peak of the Sage Plane, had actually died. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it, as it was simply unbelievable. The death of such a master was a big deal, and it was a god of the imperishable plane who had killed a master at the pinnacle of the Sage Plane across a whole level. Such a battle record could be said to be a myth among the gods. Chapter 2543. Previously, just a heavy injury was enough to stun them. Now they were speechless. It could be said that in their memory, such a thing had never happened. Not to mention killing, just a heavy injury was enough to make them feel like they had seen a legend. Smack! Without giving anyone a chance to react, a long pink whip had come directly. It was the charming woman. She was the first one to react, and she was also the one who was most afraid of Yi Shiwen. She did not make a move just now, because she never thought that the old man in black would be killed by a sword. It was simply a miracle. Now she finally reacted, and she swore that she would never give Yi Shiwen another chance. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen moved hundreds of miles away, barely dodging the attack. The space in front of him was collapsing at an astonishing speed. The whole scene was extremely shocking. Huff, huff! Yi Shiwen kept panting. At this time, he could not care so much. He quickly sucked in a billion divine source in one breath, instantly transforming it into magical power, and quickly healing the injury on his arm. Billions of divine source seemed to be a lot, but in such a battle, it was not too much. The consumption was also great, especially when he had a combat power of a higher level. A huge amount of divine source poured into his body, quickly healing the injuries on his body, and replenishing the magical power in his body. With the supply of energy, the Phoenix regeneration technique worked quickly, constantly repairing, and in a short time, a small part of it had been recovered. But the charming woman in front of him wouldn't give him that chance. She stood in the sky like an ancient monarch. Her entire body emitted a pink aura that rapidly transformed into countless laws, forming a river of laws in the sky. She stood on top of the laws, looking down on all living beings in the world. Her magic power, her Tao, everything was condensed on this long river of nomological laws. Those who were able to cultivate to the pinnacle of the sage plane all had their own trump cards. By gathering all of their powers together, they would be able to defeat even the most powerful of enemies. Countless laws formed a river, bombarding Yi Shiwen. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen kept flashing, as if he had completely lost his combat power and did not dare to compete with it. In everyone's opinion, Yi Shiwen must have lost all of his combat power. It was impossible for him to contend against the foresight. The charming woman was also closing in on Yi Shiwen step by step. The golden-winged sky roaring lion had learned its lesson from the previous time. It was attacking from the side from time to time. It didn't attack many times, but it was ruthless every time. It had forced Yi Shiwen into a corner. For a time, the sky turned dark and the sun and the moon didn't shine. All the rays of light were obscured by that huge river of Tao techniques. A kind of supreme martial arts technique could jump out from it at any time and suppress Yi Shiwen. Obediently accept your death. Don't struggle, the charming woman said coldly. The hearts of the spectators suddenly became tangled. It could be said that the previous three had been defeated by Yi Shiwen one by one. How could the remaining two give Yi Shiwen this opportunity? They would never give him the opportunity to defeat them one by one. Although it was the first time the two had cooperated, they were quite tacit. They worked together to force Yi Shiwen into a corner, especially the arrogant woman. She appeared in a martial arts arena and could launch a fatal blow at any time. Even Yi Shiwen had to raise all of his concentration and use it to guard against her. Otherwise, his head might be bitten off. Yi Shiwen's figure was constantly flashing, but his expression didn't show the slightest bit of panic. He had experienced countless battles in his life and had experienced hundreds of battles. Even if he was in a hopeless situation, he would never lose his composure. He was still waiting for an opportunity to strike back. If others were to find out about this, they would probably be scared to death. Yi Fuqian was forced into a corner by two experts at the pinnacle of the sage plane, yet he still dared to fight back. Such willpower was not something that ordinary people could compare to. Finally, all of Yi Shiwen's dodging space had been blocked by the two masters. The charming woman laughed, and a long whip came down, covering the entire sky. Even an ordinary sage realm cultivator would be whipped to death by this whip, but such a method was used to deal with Yi Shiwen, who was in the eternal realm. It could be said that it was an exception. Bang! The long whip ruthlessly struck Yi Shiwen's body and set off a boundless energy frenzy. A huge mushroom cloud spread out in all directions. It's finally over. The charming woman's face finally revealed a somewhat relaxed look. Even she herself didn't realize that Yi Shiwen wasn't just a god of the younger generation in her eyes. Instead, he had become a dreadful expert who could pose a fatal threat to her. Be careful, he's not dead yet. The voice of the golden-winged sky howling lion suddenly appeared. In his golden eyes, he seemed to see something. What? Cried the charming woman. However, before she could react, an astonishing sword chi slashed out from the tide of energy. It was almost the same method as the one used to kill the black-robed old man. No, it was even sharper and more terrifying than the one used to kill the black-robed old man. He had been waiting for this opportunity. It seemed that he had been forced into a desperate situation and seemed to have no power to resist. But this was his true backup plan. It paralyzed everyone, because even if they did not need to be paralyzed, no one would really think that they could still have the corresponding combat power after writing it. It was just that it was too late to realize it now. The sword chi swept across and split the sky, completely smashing everything. Puchi! The sword light swept down from the charming woman, and blood instantly splashed out. The charming woman's body collapsed on the spot, leaving only a wisp of spirit that wanted to escape into the distance. You want to leave? Stay. A slightly pale voice came, and a big hand grabbed out, directly annihilating the last wisp of spirit. The smoke and dust dissipated, and a figure emerged from it. Everyone looked at it, and who else could it be but Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen was even more embarrassed than before. He had forced himself to use two instruments that he could not fully control for the time being, and had already hurt some of his life force. There was only a little bit of the purple-green lotus flame left. His body desperately digested the divine source, and he swallowed 1 billion divine source in one go. Only then did he feel better, and his magic power was replenished. However, the injured life force could not be recovered so easily, and he needed to find a place to isolate himself. But it was too late now. These two divine instruments were too fierce, and ordinary people could not use them at all. He would have to wait until he reached the king level to perhaps be able to wield the 10,000 spell roulette as if it was his own arm. The sword of Avicii's quality even surpassed the 10,000 spell roulette and was above the supreme grade divine instrument. But its power was indeed great. The wealth of the charming woman also fell into his hands, and he was even richer than the old man in black. Just the divine source alone was more than 5 billion, and including some other treasures, his wealth added up to more than 12 billion divine source. At least he did not make a loss. Dead. Another one died. Everyone was frightened, and they said in fear. Previously, when he had only seriously injured two Sage Realm experts, they were already completely shocked, but seriously injuring and killing were not the same concepts at all. It should be said that the difficulty of killing was more than 10 times that of seriously injuring. He's going against the heavens. After today, his name will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with those peerless geniuses. Unimaginable, his strength is too strong. I'm afraid that this generation will also have a peerless figure like Ji Runwang of the previous generation. This is only the beginning of the Kurfürst Road, and he has already killed Sage Realm experts at the peak. In a few hundred years, I'm afraid that he will really stand shoulder to shoulder with those geniuses. In an instant, the crowd burst into an uproar. They were all dumbfounded by such a feat. The Cloud Ink City's great elder kept retreating. He was already a little powerless to deal with the wild beast puppet in front of him, and he was almost scared to death when he saw another expert whose strength was not much different from his fall from the horse by Yi Shiwen. He looked at Yi Shiwen as if he had seen a monster. He was now regretting, and for the first time, he began to feel regret. Although the Kuanpeng was very important and a very important opportunity, if this opportunity had to be exchanged with the lives of everyone, it was not worth it at all. He did not regret capturing the Kuanpeng. If it were him, he would have made the same choice, but he regretted not being able to keep it a secret. As the saying goes, a ruler who is not secretive will lose his country, and a minister who is not secretive will lose his identity. Not being able to keep it a secret had attracted these people. Among the endless troubles, Yi Shiwen was just the first wave. There were probably many people who were still coveting the Kuanpeng. Was Cloud Ink City really going to suffer heavy losses today? Not to mention the collective transformation into the bloodline of the Kuanpeng. It was even a problem to protect the bloodline of the Cloud Ink City from being destroyed. How could such a powerful Hidden Valley Kings faction let it go? At this moment, a bit of despair flashed in his eyes, and he actually had some thoughts of escaping. This was something that had never happened before. He, who was at the peak of the Sage Realm, was actually forced into such a dead end by an imperishable realm. If he had not been prepared before, and if he had followed his previous careless plan, Yi Shiwen would have probably overturned the Cloud Ink City by now. I didn't expect that all of us have underestimated you. The golden-winged sky roaring lion's eyes were piercingly cold, bursting with endless murderous intent. Aren't you going to retreat? Yi Shiwen grinned. It seems that you won't give up until you see the coffin. I'm not willing to leave now. I bet that you definitely don't have much confidence. It just so happens that I can take all the benefits by myself. The golden-winged sky, roaring lion's face was ferocious. Chapter 2544. Especially the means that could help him fight against the peak of the Sage Realm. If he could snatch it, then wouldn't there be hope for him to fight against the king-level powerhouses? That was originally only the privilege of those monstrous geniuses. Now, he also had the opportunity, and it might be possible for him to do it. Thinking of this, the greed in his heart expanded infinitely. How could he be willing to leave so easily? Benefits can really make people blinded by greed. Yi Shiwen grinned coldly, as if mocking the arrogance of the golden-winged howling sky lion. It's a pity. I don't know how many golden-winged howling sky lions are left in this world. If they die here, wouldn't it be such a pity? Would they become extinct? Everyone was shocked. At this point, Yi Shiwen still dared to say such words. Could it be that he really had a trump card that he had not used? If that was the case, then it would be terrifying. However, some people refused to believe it. Yi Shiwen's appearance looked as if he had lost all of his fighting strength. His face was deathly pale. He had restored his magic power, but he couldn't restore the vitality that he had consumed. Many people were experts in cultivation, so how could they not see it? But after the two previous examples of Yi Shiwen showing weakness and killing strong enemies, everyone was not sure in their hearts. Who knew if this guy still had a trump card that he had not used yet? Moreover, in their hearts, they could not help but be biased towards Yi Shiwen. Since he had already created such a big miracle, why not continue to carry this miracle forward and create a record that no one in the past would be able to achieve in the future? At least that was what they thought. You don't have to lie to me. I don't believe that there will be no repercussions from using your combat power so desperately. As the golden-winged howling sky lion spoke, it slowly transformed into a handsome young man. He was dressed in a golden robe and looked very noble. He had cultivated for more than hundreds of thousands of years. How could he not see through all of this? He also knew a few of these life-risking moves, but without exception, they would only stimulate one's combat power for a short period of time, and then cause serious consequences. Yi Shiwen grinned, wiped his sweat, and didn't speak. There would naturally be serious consequences, but he had already been forced to this point. So, how could he care so much about it? He was too lazy to think about it. Die! The golden wing howling sky lion was testing Yi Shiwen's true strength. To be honest, he was not completely confident. Yi Shiwen's words just now made him even more certain that Yi Shiwen was just bluffing. With a roar, a pair of golden blades appeared in his hands. They had a few patterns of wings on them, and they exuded a kind of terrifying light. This was the divine tool that his wings had transformed into. It was very terrifying, but ordinary people did not have the ability to make him use it. Boom! The two blades slashed down, and the blade light gushed out like a giant dragon, soaring into the sky, and then directly swallowed Yi Shiwen. Clang! The broken space sword in Yi Shiwen's hand suddenly spurted out a formidable blood-red sword chi, and collided with these golden dragons in the sky. Boom! A series of explosions rang out in the void, setting off a boundless frenzy. Bang! There was a loud explosion, and the broken space sword in Yi Shiwen's hand suddenly burst open and turned into powder. Even Yi Shiwen's hand was injured by the explosion. The sword in his hand is broken, someone exclaimed. Cracks had already appeared on the broken space sword in Yi Shiwen's hand, but they did not pay too much attention at that time. Now that it suddenly exploded, they really understood how terrifying the broken space sword was enduring. What made countless people even more speechless was that the broken space sword, a divine sword that was about to reach the level of a high-grade divine tool, had exploded on the spot. Although Yi Shiwen's arm continued to crack and bleed, in fact, there were no real unbearable consequences. How tyrannical was his physical body? Could it be that it was above the broken space sword? Many people could not help but gasp when they thought of this. No wonder he could fight until now. If it was an ordinary person, even if their physical body was comparable to a low-grade divine tool, they would not have been able to withstand it and would have exploded on the spot. Ha ha! Sure enough, boy, today is the day you die. The golden wing howling sky lion saw the broken space sword in Yi Shiwen's hand explode and suddenly laughed even more arrogantly. Sure enough, he had guessed correctly. An incomparably sinister smile appeared on his face. Sure enough, death is imminent. You have already gone crazy, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Do you think this is funny? For you, this is the day you die. The golden wing howling sky lion suddenly stopped smiling because he seemed to have thought of something. Was the mysterious instrument that Yi Shiwen was most afraid of the most finally going to appear? Previously, Yi Shiwen had not come out, so everyone thought that he had not used his full strength. That was why they were tricked by him. Was it going to come out now? Haven't you always wanted to see it? Yi Shiwen sneered. In the void, countless evil energies suddenly condensed and became several times denser. A blood-red sword light soared into the sky, as if the world had been transformed into a bloody hell. What kind of instrument is this? How can it be so terrifying? It has only just appeared, but it seems like it is going to turn the world into a hell. Someone couldn't help but cry out in alarm. They instantly felt a wave of evil chi being emitted. Compared to the current hostility, the little bit of hostility they had felt before was nothing at all. The blood-red light soared into the sky, covering the world. The sun in the sky seemed to have turned into a blood sun, emitting a kind of blood-red light. It was exceptionally strange. The baleful aura contained within the blood-colored light was actually able to invade and affect the minds of the gods. At this time, the gods watching the battle from outside finally understood why such a powerful peak of the sage realm would fall for Yi Shiwen's trick. This hostility could even affect the gods. It was simply ridiculously strong. That sword in his hand is also extraordinary. Just what is its origin? Such a powerful, ominous sword would most likely not be unknown. It definitely had a history. Only, many people looked through all of their memories, but they still did not dare to be certain. This was because there were too many famous ominous swords in history, and it was truly difficult to distinguish them. However, they believed that there was still a chance to find out. There were many divine swords in history that were famous for being ominous swords, but there were not many that could be so ridiculously strong. Moreover, it seemed that it was far from the point where this ominous sword could be used to its fullest potential. The expression of the golden-winged sky, howling lion changed all of a sudden. Although he had been mentally prepared, when he really saw the appearance of the Sword of Avicii, he still felt a chill. He finally understood where Yi Shiwen's confidence came from. It was not how arrogant he was, but that the Sword of Avicii was really terrifying. Yi Shiwen's hands were trembling, and the hostility quickly tore everything apart, invading his body. Blood gushed out of his right hand like a spring, and cracks began to appear on his left hand. The faint bloodlust in his eyes suddenly turned crimson. Didn't you want to see? Then I will send you to hell to slowly see. Yi Shiwen grinned, and his expression was a bit ferocious. Scales even grew on his skin. It was none other than the star beast bloodline that had been activated, and it was boiling all of a sudden. Yi Shiwen understood that he had been affected at this time. Without the enlightening mind ancient tree to stabilize his mind, the harm of using such a big, killing weapon was reflected. Compared to the physical injury caused by the sword aura, the more terrifying erosion of the spirit was. If this went on for a long time, he might even become a madman. This was almost impossible for a deity, but continuous use of the Sword of Avicii might cause such consequences. Swish! Yi Shiwen took a step forward, and the demon wings behind him were fully opened. In this bloody light, he looked extremely ferocious. The Avicii sword aura brought by the Sword of Avicii was more than 10 times more terrifying than the sword aura released by the sky-splitting sword just now. Even Wu Zimo was severely injured previously, so its power could be imagined. Boom! The sword aura crushed down inch by inch, and the sky also collapsed inch by inch under the crushing of this sword aura. Roar! The golden-winged sky roaring lion roared, and the two sabers faced this sword aura. Boom! After resisting for less than 3 seconds, the high-grade divine artifact that his wings had transformed into actually shattered on the spot. In an instant, it completely collapsed. How is this possible? His eyes widened in disbelief. With the toughness of the high-grade god artifact that his wings had transformed into, how was it possible for them to instantly shatter after only blocking for 3 seconds? This sword was a little too terrifying, wasn't it? At this time, he was really afraid. A deep fear suddenly emerged from his heart. He had completely regretted it. In order to get Yi Shiwen's adventure and inheritance, he actually stayed. No matter how right it seemed at the time, it seemed extremely stupid at this time. Boom! The sword aura slashed down, and it was extremely fast, It did not give him any chance to react at all, and it directly drowned him. Ah! A scream came from the sword aura, but it was useless. Everyone only saw that the golden-winged sky-roaring lion was slashed into nothingness in front of everyone, and not even a bit of residue was left. Countless wealth burst into a large piece, and was also collected by Yi Shiwen. Chapter 2545. Under this terrifying attack, even the two people who were recuperating at the side were unsurprisingly caught up in it. They were already heavily injured, and now they were smashed into a cloud of blood mist. After this attack, Yi Shiwen absorbed 2 billion divine source in a row, but his face was still pale. The rolling spiritual qi, along with the endless divine source, flowed into his body, replenishing the mana that he had consumed. However, the vitality that he had injured would need some time to recover. Seeing that Yi Shiwen's mana was recovering bit by bit, no one dared to come forward to cause trouble. Yi Shiwen's valiance had completely frightened them. Just when everyone thought that he had no more strength to attack, he killed all the experts at the pinnacle of the Sage Realm in one go. Under such circumstances, no one dared to say that Yi Shiwen had really lost all his combat power. As long as that peerless sword was in his hand, no one dared to underestimate Yi Shiwen. In this battle, Yi Shiwen had completely established his invincible reputation. In this generation, there was no one who could be on par with him for the time being. He even had the time to calculate. The wealth that he had obtained this time, if converted to divine source, was more than 40 billion. Although he had absorbed a few billion previously, there was still about 40 billion left. It was considered a huge fortune. So, under such a large crowd, Yi Shiwen began to sit cross-legged and adjust his breathing. After a series of battles, he had paid a price and also gained a lot. All in all, he had gained a little more. After adjusting his breathing, Yi Shiwen openly entered the secret chamber where the great Kuan Peng was imprisoned. At this time, the blood essence of the young great Kuan Peng had already filled an entire pond. The feathers on its body had already lost their luster. If this continued, it would bleed to death while still alive. Bang! 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 Yi Shiwen swung out a beam of sword qi, and the god-ruled chains that bound the young Kuan Peng were all cut by him. The young Kuan Peng opened its eyes. Although its appearance was already different, in reality, Yi Shiwen had only changed slightly on the basis of its original appearance. In addition, the Kuan Peng recognized Yi Shiwen's aura, so it recognized him immediately. "Are you all right?" Yi Shiwen could not hide the anger on his face. "I'm fine, I just got caught and lost some blood." Young Kuan Peng regained some of its strength. Without the suppression of the god-ruled chains, it felt much better. It opened its mouth and sucked all the blood essence back into its body. Its complexion looked much better. Although its vitality couldn't be replenished immediately, it could be said that it had recovered most of its essence. "How could you be so careless?" Yi Shiwen said in a strange tone. Young Kuan Peng chuckled. There was still a hint of youth in his voice. He had always been a youth, but after experiencing this, he felt like he had changed a lot. The fierceness buried deep in his Kuan Peng bloodline had been stimulated quite a bit. "Since you were able to come here, that old fellow must have been killed by you. I'm going to devour all these damned fellows. Otherwise, I won't be able to get rid of the hatred in my heart." Young Kuan Peng's eyes flashed with ferocity. Young Kuan Peng was the leader of the 10 great ferocious beasts. Needless to say, it had been raised as a pet by Yi Shiwen all these years. Although its cultivation had been increasing, that was due to its talent and bloodline inheritance. Its own fierceness had long been worn down. However, after this great change, the fierceness in its bloodline had been completely stimulated. "Not yet. That old fellow isn't dead yet. Watch me finish him." Yi Shiwen was relieved when he saw that young Kuan Peng was fine. He looked into the sky. After passing through layer after layer of chambers, he saw the Grand Elder of Ink Cloud City retreating ceaselessly at this moment, and he was steadily losing ground under the suppression of the puppet beast. Even though his strength was extremely formidable, it just so happened that he'd encountered a puppet beast that was ferocious and unafraid of death. Moreover, Its entire body was even constructed from countless precious divine materials. So it was even extremely difficult for him to cause the slightest harm to the puppet beast. Moreover, after Yi Shiwen killed the 5 supreme experts that he had invited, he already had the intention to retreat. He understood that as long as he was alive, he could rebuild the Cloud Ink City. However, if he was dead, then there would be no hope at all. It was a pity that he was entangled by the wild beast puppet and could not escape at all. Boom! Just when Yi Shiwen was about to make a move, the sky suddenly shattered, and a giant hand descended from the sky and firmly grabbed the Cloud Ink City Elder. The Cloud Ink City Elder wanted to struggle, but he couldn't do anything. All the laws were controlled, so he couldn't extend his divine kingdom even if he wanted to. When he saw that the giant hand began to burn with raging flames, the expression in his eyes suddenly changed. Flame Lord, I didn't expect you to still remember me. However, since you know my name, you still dare to touch the people of the Hidden Valley. I think you are really tired of living. Do you really think that the Hidden Valley can't find someone to deal with you? The Flame Lord's figure slowly appeared from the void. Your Honor? Yi Shiwen was a little stunned. He did not expect the Flame Lord to rush over. Your Honor is here too? Young Kuan Peng also recognized the current manager of the Hidden Valley, the Flame Lord. Although they were not from the same lineage, they, as juniors, had to show enough respect to a senior like the Flame Lord. Even the Flame Lord of the Hidden Valley has appeared. Didn't he no longer participate in the selection of the Kerfurst Road? Someone exclaimed. In the Kerfurst Road, the Flame Lord was not a nobody. In the past, he was also all-powerful and invincible. However, he later withdrew from the selection of the Kerfurst Road. In terms of time, it was not a long time. It was just a few terms. That's true. The Cloud Ink City deserves this calamity today. Who asked them to be so arrogant? Even if the king powerhouses of those sects cannot enter, they often have many tyrannical divine masters in their sections. Do they really think that the Hidden Valley can't do anything to them? So powerful. Although the Flame Lord has yet to become a king after so many tens of thousands of years, he seems to have become even more powerful. I'm afraid he is not far from becoming a king. An old antique exclaimed. He had seen the Flame Lord in action before. However, compared to then, the current Flame Lord was even more unfathomable and majestic. Flame Lord, according to the agreement of the major forces, all killings that happen in the Kerfurst Road are not to be pursued. Have you forgotten? The Cloud Ink City's great elder screamed. His strength was far inferior to the Flame Lord's. There was fear in his eyes. It was completely different from when he was facing Yi Shiwen. He was wary of Yi Shiwen, but that was all. However, the Flame Lord truly made him feel fear. Back then, when the Flame Lord was already invincible, he had only just entered the Sage Plane. After all these years, he had become a vanguard of the Sage Plane. However, he realized that the gap between him and the Lord of Flames had not shrunk at all. Instead, it had widened. They were both at the pinnacle of the Sage Plane, but he could not even withstand a single blow from the Lord of Flames. He knew very well that although it was a surprise attack, even if they were to fight head-on, it would not be much better. The Flame Lord had probably already made a breakthrough. As such, he could only use the agreement of the major forces back then to fight for a chance of survival. Humph! Who do you think you are? Do you think that agreement is applicable to you? Furthermore, that was just an ordinary massacre. How can I possibly let you off for trying to capture the disciples of my lineage? Cut the crap. Today, not a single one of your lineage from Cloud Ink City can dream of escaping. All of you shall die, the Master of Flames said coldly. At that moment, everyone finally noticed that a barrier had appeared in the surrounding space without them knowing, isolating them from the outside world. Behind the barrier, many figures appeared indistinctly in front of everyone. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This was the arrival of the Hidden Valley's army. Many people finally remembered that although there was such an agreement, it was an agreement made between the king's sects in order to avoid killing each other. How could an ordinary person be qualified to make them feel fear? The people from the Cloud Ink City were considered powerful in the Taikishan heaven. However, in the eyes of the Hidden Valley, they were probably just a slightly stronger ant. All these years, because king-rank martial artists could not enter, many people seem to have forgotten how terrifying the king-rank sects were. Compared to the king-rank sects outside, the king-rank sects were too weak. They were not even on the same level. However, it seemed that it had been a long time. So many people had forgotten the terror of the sections. No, you can't do this. At this moment, the great elder of the Cloud Ink City had gone completely mad and was terrified. The Hidden Valley was planning to kill the chicken to warn the monkey and kill all of them. Not only would he die, but all the people from the Cloud Ink City would die here today. The once illustrious Cloud Ink City was going to vanish into thin air today. Humph! The Lord of Flames did not bother to talk to him. The flames in his hands leaped up, and the chief elder of the Cloud Ink City was burned to ashes by those flames. Lord of Flames, we are not from the Cloud Ink City. Please let us live. We are not familiar with the Cloud Ink City at all. Don't kill us. We are innocent. At that moment, the onlookers finally reacted and shouted. They drew a clear line between themselves and the people from the Cloud Ink City. They did not dare to have anything to do with them. Immediately, those from Cloud Ink City were isolated from the crowd. Even if those from Cloud Ink City wanted to escape, they would be beaten back by the others. For the sake of their own survival, all of them had gone crazy. The experts from the Hidden Valley had not made a move, but they had already killed each other, setting off a reign of terror. Chapter 2546. Most of the experts from Cloud Ink City had already died in Yi Xuan's hands. Therefore, when they wanted to resist, they were no match for the experts who were watching from the sidelines. Among these people, there were many who came with ill intentions, and there were many experts who were hiding among them. By the time the experts from the Hidden Valley had intervened, more than half of the people from Cloud Ink City had been killed or injured. Moreover, it was very easy to identify them. No one wanted to have anything to do with them, so they could not hide even if they wanted to. With the addition of the experts from the Hidden Valley, the battle that could originally be regarded as a fight had completely turned into a one-sided massacre. Those people had no strength to fight back when faced with these experts from the Hidden Valley. The powerful strength of the Hidden Valley as a kingship sect was reflected incisively and vividly at this moment. The Flame Lord stood in mid-air with his hands behind his back, silently watching this massacre. For him, he had experienced such things too many times and was already numb to it. The Hidden Valley also needed such a battle to reorganize their prestige. "Greetings, Your Honor!" Yi Xuan flew up with the young Kuan-Peng and retrieved the wild beast puppet. At this moment, he had already returned to his original appearance and went forward to greet the Flame Lord. "I was wondering why this place was already in ruins. It turns out that you came here and caused a huge commotion." The Flame Lord suddenly realized and said, "Kid, you are quite capable to be able to force them to this point. It's just a lose-lose situation," Yi Xuan said with a wry smile. Although he had harvested a lot of divine source this time, the consumed purple-green lotus flame was not something that could be bought with divine source. Now, he had consumed one, and the wild beast puppet had consumed half of it. Now, there was only half left. It was not a complete loss, but it was not a complete victory either. To be able to do this, for the time being, it should be said that there is no one in your generation who can do this. "You don't have to be overly humble," said the Flame Lord. "That puppet should be yours." "That's right." Yi Xuan nodded. "If I remember correctly, this puppet of yours should be Zhao Tianquang's wild beast puppet." The Lord of Flames said, "Back when I first made my debut, he was already famous. He could be considered a great senior. I never expected that this desolate beast puppet would end up in your hands." Yi Xuan didn't try to hide anything and told him everything about Zhao Tianquang. Anyway, there was nothing to hide. Who would have thought that a proud son of heaven would die there? When he suddenly disappeared, many people thought that he had gone into seclusion, but who would have thought that he had died? Since the wild beast puppet has fallen into your hands, it must mean that you are fated. The Flame Overlord lamented, but back then, Zhao Tianquang was invincible because of the dire beast puppet. You can't even unleash a tenth of the dire beast puppet's power. When your cultivation reaches that level, You'll be able to wield the dire beast puppet like it's your own arm." Yishuan nodded. He naturally knew that the purple-green lotus flame seemed to be unable to fully exert the power of the desolate beast puppet. More importantly, the desolate beast puppet couldn't defeat the great elder of the clouding city even after fighting for a long time. The great elder was actually killed by the flame lord. Yishuan was a little dumbfounded when he was below. They were both at the peak of the sage realm, but the difference in strength between them was too great. "If I may ask, what kind of sect is the Divine Puppet Sect? Why have I never heard of it?" Yishuan asked. Even if he hadn't seen all of those famous sects, he would have heard of them. If the Divine Puppet Sect was able to cultivate someone like Zhao Tianquang, then his master seemed to be even stronger. He was a king-level powerhouse. How could he be so unknown? It's normal that you don't know. 1,000,000 years ago, the Divine Puppet Sect was indeed glorious, but it declined later on. All of this has something to do with Zhao Tianquang. The Flame Overlord explained. After listening to the Flame Overlord, Yishuan realized that there were many unforeseen events hidden within. Back then, the Divine Puppet Sect could be said to be prosperous. It was a sect with a king-level powerhouse. Generally speaking, it was difficult for a sect with a king-level powerhouse to truly decline. This was because king-level powerhouses were a group of invincible people. In addition, they had existed for a long time. So as long as the king-level powerhouse did not die, it was difficult to truly damage their vitality. However, the leader of the Divine Puppet Sect at that time was Zhao Tianquang's master. He was also the only king-level powerhouse in the Divine Puppet Sect at that time. Such a person was naturally powerful, and at the same time, he taught many disciples. Among them, besides Zhao Tianquang, the most outstanding one was his second disciple. Originally, Zhao Tianquang was favored by everyone, and he was also the successor of the leader. Once he had explored the Kerfur's Road enough, he would naturally come back and break through to the king level to take over the Divine Puppet Sect. By then, the Divine Puppet Sect with 2 king-level powerhouses would be even more powerful and stable. However, Zhao Tianquang died in the Kerfur's Road and never appeared again. Therefore, in desperation, the leader of the Divine Puppet Sect chose his second disciple to be the leader of the sect. Who would have thought that this second disciple would betray the sect? He hated the Divine Puppet Sect's leader for being biased towards Zhao Tianquang, and he harbored hatred in his heart, which led to external enemies. After countless upheavals, the leader of the Divine Puppet Sect died, and the Divine Puppet Sect was also greatly weakened. Countless experts were killed and injured, and they have not recovered to this day. The Divine Puppet Sect also fell from being an invincible king-level sect to just an ordinary immortal inheritance. There were too many such inheritances in the universe, so Yishuan had never heard of them. So there are so many strange twists and turns. Yishuan was a little stunned. If not for the Flame Overlord, who had lived for many years in the village, perhaps no one would have known about the past. The death of Zhao Tianquang brought about a series of consequences and changed the fate of countless people. This was the butterfly effect. Seemingly insignificant changes, but they brought about extremely serious consequences. "Greetings, Your Honor. Your disciple is ashamed to have troubled Your Honor to come in person." Young Kuan-peng finally interrupted at this time and said with some embarrassment. If he had not been captured, the Hidden Valley would not have mobilized so many people to rescue him, not to mention that Yishuan had fought a bloody battle for him. And this was all because of his own carelessness. "I was also entrusted by Senior Kuan-peng. It's no big deal. You have just started your cultivation and don't have much experience. It's nothing." The Flame Overlord shook his head and said, "Some people have completely forgotten who they can provoke and who they can't." The Flame Overlord's expression was cold. The experts of the Hidden Valley moved extremely quickly. Soon, these people from the Clouding City were all killed by the experts of the Hidden Valley. The remaining people watched the experts of the Hidden Valley leave in shock. Only then did they understand how big the gap between them and the king-level sect was. And this matter also quickly spread in the Kerfur's Road along with these lucky survivors. These people came from various heavens of the Kerfur's Road and spread the news overnight. For a time, the entire Kerfur's Road was shocked. The news that Kuan was captured by the Clouding City had already spread. Many people were paying attention to the subsequent development of the matter. Some people even disdained it. How could the king-level sect be so harmless that they did not fight back when they were bullied? Sure enough, this confirmed their guess. Either the Hidden Valley did not take action, or once they took action, the entire Clouding City was slaughtered. Although they were one of the protagonists of the whole incident, no one paid attention to the Clouding City. Although there were some survivors of the Clouding City who were not in the city before and had escaped running around to complain about the atrocities of the Hidden Valley, they seemed to be more like jumping clowns. No one cared at all. The tea cools when the person leaves, and the monkeys scatter when the tree falls. What everyone was more concerned about was the significance of the Hidden Valley's actions this time. It seemed to be a warning that there were some local forces in the Kerfurst Road that were becoming more and more unscrupulous. Although there was an agreement that life and death were not allowed, there were also restrictions. However, there were limits to it as well. Life and death really didn't matter in a normal battle. But the actions of the Clouding City had completely exceeded the bottom line of the various regal sects. Thus, none of the regal sects really raised any objections to this. More ordinary people were discussing this matter. Through this matter, more people also felt the power and terror of the king-level sect. In addition to the Hidden Valley, Yi Shiwen was also the focus of countless people's discussion. He had single-handedly slaughtered 5 people at the peak of the Sage Realm, which had set a record for this generation. Among the experts of this generation, no one had been able to do this. Although there were various reasons, and some people even pointed out that it should be because of the Peerless Sword, but even so, there was probably no one in this generation who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. In the mouths of many busybodies, Yi Shiwen had vaguely become the #1 expert of the current generation. Unlike the last time when he had only severely injured Wu Zimo, this time he had consecutively killed 5 almighties at the pinnacle of the Sage Plane. Most importantly, he was only at the imperishable plane. This was even more terrifying. When he condensed the Divine Kingdom and reached the Sage Realm, no one knew how powerful he would be. Although saying this meant looking down on many geniuses of this generation, it was true. In the past, it was not that there were no existences of the current generation who could compete with the monstrous monsters, but that was in the later stages of the Kerfurst Road's opening. Now it was only the early stages of the Kerfurst Road's opening. Yi Shiwen, who was able to do this, was even more shocking. No matter what kind of twisted logic he used, in the eyes of everyone, he was an extremely dangerous and terrifying existence. Other than those monstrous monsters, no one dared to underestimate him anymore. One by one, they added Yi Shiwen to the list of people who should not be messed with. Yi Shiwen's name had spread far and wide in all directions at lightning speed amidst this heated discussion. Chapter 2547. Throughout the countless years, there were indeed countless geniuses who became famous after participating in the Kerfurst Road for the first time, but that was almost all in the middle or even the late stages of the Kerfurst Road. Even so, they had become famous figures. Jiren Wang's invincible demeanor was still remembered by people even now, but very few could become famous in the early stages of the Kerfurst Road. There was no other reason. It was not because there were no outstanding figures in this generation, but because there were too many ancient and even super ancient monsters left in the Kerfurst Road, and they were the focus of everyone's attention. No matter how powerful the masters of this generation were, they could not be compared with these people at all, let alone attract the attention of others. So at this time, many people were cultivating with all their might, or had some fortuitous encounter and were trying their best to digest it. But even so, the Kerfurst Road was only open for 1,000 years. To be able to reach the level of those monsters who had cultivated for an incomparably long time in this 1,000 years, there might not even be one in every 100,000 years. Otherwise, Jiren Wang would not be remembered until now. And Yi Shiwen could only be regarded as an accident, because with the cultivation of the imperishable realm, he killed a peak of the Sage Realm, which was the biggest reason why he was truly famous in the world and known as the first person of this generation. Others did not care what means Yi Shiwen used to kill him. Even if he could only use his trump card once, it was also a part of his strength. Although these were only ordinary peak of the Sage realm, they were still first-class masters in the Kurfürst Road. After this battle, Yi Shiwen became famous in the Kurfürst Road, and the Limit Road was the focus of attention of all the heavens and realms. To be famous in the Kurfürst Road, naturally he could be famous in the heavens and realms. At the very least, it would be the attention of those masters in the heavens and realms, and it was no longer limited to the popularity of a certain world. But this also pushed Yi Shiwen to the teeth of the storm. Under the push of many people were eager to kill Yi Shiwen, and more people were stepping on him to rise. Since ancient times, there had been many monstrous geniuses who had been killed by others, and those who had killed these monstrous geniuses had all, without exception, become famous for a period of time. Compared to those similarly famous evildoers, Yi Shiwen was much easier to deal with. At least he was just an undead realm. In an active volcano, a vermilion bird lay motionless in the lava. After a long time, it opened its eyes, and the flames on its body erupted like a geyser. The lava transformed into a huge god kingdom. After a long time, the vermilion bird finally put it away. I didn't expect Yi Shiwen to be stronger than I thought. He must have had a fortuitous encounter during this time. After I refine the last bit of purple-blue lotus flame, I will go to the upper heavens to find my brother. If this continues, I will be left behind by that guy. Zhu Yin seemed to remember the young man who claimed to surpass all monstrous geniuses. Compared to arrogance, the expression on his face could be described as confidence. She had seen countless fanatics in her life, but the feeling she got from him was not that kind of arrogant fanatic. Perhaps one day, I will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Big Brother. In her heart, being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with her evildoer brother was already the highest level of evaluation. At the same time, on a mountain, a handsome man sat cross-legged in midair. Countless sword auras were patrolling around his body, slowly forming a huge god kingdom. I have finally recovered some strength. Sooner or later, I will be able to be conferred the title of king again. Yi Shiwen, I must get that peerless, ominous sword. If Yi Shiwen saw him, he would recognize that this person was none other than Jun Dingtian. Many years had passed, but Jun Dingtian was not depressed. On the contrary, he was advancing by leaps and bounds. He was the reincarnation of a divine king. As his cultivation became more profound, he slowly recovered the memories of his previous life. With more and more memories, his cultivation speed became faster and faster. However, he had never told anyone about it. Even ordinary people only thought that he was the reincarnation of an ordinary god. However, if he was just the reincarnation of an ordinary god, he would certainly not be valued by the higher-ups of the Hidden Valley. As a disciple of the Hidden Valley, he also received a detailed report of the battle. Compared to others who paid attention to Yi Shiwen, he paid more attention to the peerless ominous sword in Yi Shiwen's hand, although no one knew where that ominous sword came from. But for Yi Shiwen to be able to kill a sage at the peak of the imperishable realm, it was obviously not ordinary. Moreover, he cultivated in swordsmanship, so he immediately had a plan in mind. In the depths of an ancient sea, a man with a cold expression cut a huge beast in half with a sword. That powerful beast of the Sage Plain could not even withstand a single strike from this man. He was dressed in dark yellow, and his eyebrows reached his temples. He was extremely handsome, and there was a burst of light in his eyes. Number one in the world? How boring. Jirenhua, my brother, wait for me. One day, I will let everyone know that only I am the number one in the Ji clan. There was a slight sneer at the corner of his mouth. He swallowed the inner core of the beast in the sea, and the magical power in his body surged. Damn it, there are no heroes in this era. I can't believe this kid became famous. In a huge and gorgeous palace floating in the sky, Wu Ziyu smashed the table in front of him with a palm. When he heard the news, he wanted to kill him. He was originally one of the most promising young heroes of his generation, and was known as the person most likely to enter the ranks of monsters, on par with his brother. In the end, he was defeated by Yi Shiwen, and his reputation plummeted. He used all his power to hunt down Yi Shiwen. But Yi Shiwen not only came out unscathed, but also became famous all over the world. Now, he was even known as the #1 in the world. How could he take this lying down? If you have the time, you might as well cultivate. In the depths of the palace, Wu Zimo sat on the throne, his expression extremely cold. At the mention of Yi Shiwen, there was also indescribable hatred in his eyes. That battle made Yi Shiwen start to be noticed, and it also caused his reputation to plummet. He, who had never been defeated, actually suffered a great loss at Yi Shiwen's hands. In the eyes of everyone, although this was not a defeat, it was no different from a defeat. His hands tightly grasped the armrest of the throne, and cracks appeared on the armrest, revealing that his heart was not as calm as his face. He just relies on a good magic tool. What's so great about it? Wu Ziyu said unwillingly. Having a good magic tool is also his ability. Right now, you are not his opponent, but it is also a fact. If you meet again, based on his strength according to the intelligence, you may not even be able to take one move from him. Wu Zimo said indifferently. Although he also suffered a great loss at Yi Shiwen's hands, it was due to carelessness. Since he knew his trump card, it would not be so easy for Yi Shiwen to trick him. If he could not trick him, the gap between them was still huge, and he was fearless. Damn it, I'm not willing, Wu Ziyu said angrily. I know of a secret territory. If you can walk out of it alive, maybe you can compete with him, Wu Zimo said, and he glanced at Wu Ziyu. Wu Ziyu suddenly stood up and said, Damn, I don't believe that I am not as good as that damned human. He is just an ordinary person. How can he be compared with me? Wu Ziyu was indeed not willing. His bloodline and his identity, among so many monstrous geniuses in the Kerfus Road, was also first class, but what did Yi Shiwen have? He was just an ordinary human, not even a special physique. Losing to such a person, he simply felt that it was an insult to his bloodline and identity. Good, Wu Zimo said, closed his eyes, and then fell silent. And in the depths of the Kerfus Road, in front of a secret territory, Yi Wudi and the tomb slave old man came one after the other. Young master, according to the ancient books left by the heavenly court, there was once a monstrous genius of the heavenly court who fell here. You must obtain his inheritance to have the opportunity to fight against those monstrous geniuses, and even in the future great calamity, fight for the glory of the heavenly court. The tomb slave old man's voice was slightly hoarse, and his body seemed to have a bit of corpse chi. Yes, Yi Shiwen's progress is so fast that I am about to be surpassed. I will be in closed-door training for the next time. By the way, I asked you to inquire about the reincarnation grass. How is it? Yi Wudi nodded. There is still no news, only a little record, but if there is no record of it in the ancient heavenly court, I am afraid that there will not be any record of it. Now I have mobilized all the people to search, and they are checking many ancient books. If there is any news, I will immediately inform Yi Shiwen. You don't have to worry about this, the tomb slave old man said. With the power of the entire ancient heavenly court to help Yi Shiwen search, the effect was obvious. Yi Wudi nodded, and then stepped into the secret territory. At this time, many people on the Kerfus Road were shocked because Yi Shiwen had killed a divine lord at the peak of the Sage Realm, while Yi Shiwen himself was hiding in a secret territory in the Kerfus Road. He wanted to condense the divine nation here and rush to the Sage Realm in one go. By then, his combat power would be greatly improved. He would also go one step further toward the peak. Condensing the divine nation was the first step to the Sage Realm, and it was also the most important step. All the previous cultivation would be fully reflected and condensed at this time. The cultivation of warriors was based on the understanding of heaven and earth, and condensing the divine nation was to use all the understanding of heaven and earth, and with one's own understanding, to recreate a world. During this process, one's comprehension of the laws and the world would rise to a higher level. At the same time, it was also the most time-consuming process. During this period, the more complete the divine kingdom was, the more powerful it would be. At the same time, the path of cultivation in the future would also be wider. Chapter 2548. A divine nation was a small world, one that was completely controlled by the gods. In the future, when a divine master comprehended the world, he would have to do so in this small world as well. In fact, he would even have to perform magnificent feats of creation in order to truly transcend the world and attain the true way. In other words, the more complete this small world was, the more likely a future divine master would be able to advance further and reach the divine king realm. Ordinary divine masters could only reach around 50%, and that was already their limit. Some indestructible realm experts, like Ao Chaozong, could use some methods to create a fake god nation, but in reality, they could only reach 10 to 20% of its completion, which was a far cry from a real god nation. To reach the titled king realm, a divine nation had to be at least 70% complete. While it was only a 20% difference, it was a gap that most people could not overcome. Moreover, after a divine nation was formed, it was almost set in stone. It would be extremely difficult to improve it further. It could be said that the divine nation would be the same as how it was formed at the beginning. Unless there were some special encounters, it could not be changed. Those who could form 60% would have an easier time reaching the pinnacle of the sage realm in the future. Compared to those who could only form 50%, there was a huge difference in difficulty. Those who could form 70% could only be considered ordinary kings. To reach the pinnacle of the king realm, one had to form more than 80% of the divine kingdom. 90% was the level of the legendary emperor. As for 100% complete, no one could achieve that, because even the heavenly way itself was not complete. The Great Path had 50%, and the heavenly way had 49%. Even the heavenly way was not complete, let alone a divine nation that was formed by imitating the heavenly way. According to ancient legends, whoever could truly form a complete divine nation would be able to truly transcend the universe and become the origin of all things. But that was the elusive one that even emperors were searching for, and it was not something that Yi Shiwen could come into contact with. Although Yi Shiwen had never formed a divine nation, it did not stop him from knowing this. This was because the Lord of Flames had not left immediately after that battle. Yi Shiwen and young Kuan Peng were not in peak condition, and the Lord of Flames was also afraid that someone would take advantage of the situation. Yi Shiwen also took the opportunity to ask about the various secrets of forming a divine nation. This was the benefit of having an inheritance. The seniors in the sect had cultivated it countless times, so it was much faster than fumbling around alone. Moreover, he didn't need to take a detour with the experience and lessons of his predecessors. If no one had given him pointers, he might have casually condensed the divine nation. But now, he knew that it wasn't the faster the divine kingdom was formed, the better it was. The more perfect the laws were, the easier it would be to cultivate in the future. On the contrary, if the foundation wasn't built well from the start, it would be extremely difficult to cultivate in the future. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to condense the divine nation. Instead, he was constantly deducing the principles of the world. The more information he deduced, the easier it would be for him to condense the divine nation in the future. Although the Flame Lord didn't say anything, Yi Shiwen had his own plans in mind. He wanted to condense 90% of the divine kingdom in one go, so that he would be qualified to attack the Emperor's Road. The fight for the Emperor's Road would take a long time. However, the laying of the foundation had to start now. As far as he knew from the Flame Lord, not all of those monstrous geniuses had condensed 90% of the Holy Kingdom. However, Yi Shiwen understood another meaning. In other words, many of them had condensed 90% of the Holy Kingdom. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been like this. These people had top-notch qualifications and were qualified to attack the Emperor's Road. When these people were in the Sage Plane, they might not have been able to truly stand out. However, when they chose to break through to the King Rank Plane, the gap between them would quickly widen. Since he was going to do it, Yi Shiwen naturally had to do it to the best of his ability. As for 100% of the Holy Kingdom, unless he found the escape one, he wouldn't dare to dream about it. Moreover, if he could truly condense 100% of the Holy Kingdom, it wouldn't be a divine kingdom anymore, but a real world. At that time, he would truly be an ancestor that could split the heavens and earth apart. The fortune that could be obtained from splitting the heavens and earth apart was simply unimaginable. 90% was already the best that a human could do. As such, he wasn't in a hurry. It just so happened that he had killed 5 powerful pinnacle sage plane cultivators. All of their wealth fell into Yi Shiwen's hands. He simply exchanged all the useless treasures with the Flame Lord for divine source. Although these treasures were of limited use to him, they were indeed very useful to the Flame Lord. He could use them to reward his disciples. As such, he happily exchanged them for Yi Shiwen and even gave him a lot of benefits. The price increased by a lot, causing the divine source in Yi Shiwen's hands to rise to 50 billion divine source again. With these divine source as a foundation, Yi Shiwen also had the confidence to start deducing the endless heavenly way laws. At Yi Shiwen's level, it could be said that he had dabbled in many heavenly way laws. It was just a matter of whether he was proficient or not. As such, if he wanted to improve further and cultivate to the point where he could condense a holy kingdom, every little bit of progress would require him to devour a huge amount of divine source. And this was under the condition that he had the mysterious space. Without the mysterious space's support, every little bit of progress would require him to spend a huge amount of time cultivating and comprehending. As such, at his level, normal cultivation would no longer allow him to improve by leaps and bounds in a short period of time. If he wanted to improve in a short period of time, he could only have a fortuitous encounter. One fortuitous encounter could allow him to improve by leaps and bounds to a level that he didn't even dare to imagine. As he continued deducing the various martial arts that he had learned, he also asked the Flame Lord about some things that he didn't understand. The Flame Lord also told him everything he knew without holding back. For the Flame Lord, this was also an opportunity to verify the martial arts that he had learned. Yi Shiwen's level was much lower than his, but he had the help of the mysterious space. As such, he was able to see many things very deeply. Perhaps the breadth of his understanding was not as broad as that of the Flame Lord, but the depth of some of the questions was enough for him to deeply understand. Even drawing inferences from one case made him feel like he had a sudden epiphany. Therefore, although it was imparting, the Flame Lord also gained a lot from it. He was also willing to explain to Yi Shiwen. Apart from him, the young Kun Peng was also in the same situation. He was at the crucial stage of condensing his divine kingdom. However, condensing his divine kingdom was different from Yi Shiwen's. As long as he stimulated his innate bloodline, the various comprehensions of his ancestors would naturally manifest in his bloodline. One must know that the demon master Kun Peng was an invincible figure in the world back then. There were very few who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. His comprehensions were passed down through his bloodline. With continuous cultivation, they could be stimulated, so there was no such thing as a bottleneck in their cultivation. Therefore, as long as he condensed his divine kingdom, it would definitely be in 90% divine kingdom. It would be one of the top bloodlines in the world. There were only a few bloodlines that could be compared to the Kun Peng. After Yi Shiwen learned about this from the Flame Lord, there was only one word to describe his feelings. He had risked his life and worked hard to comprehend, but he had only set a 90% divine kingdom as his goal. As long as the Kun Peng stimulated his bloodline, he could naturally condense a 90% divine kingdom. This made him sigh again. The difference between people was really indescribable. Previously, his bloodline hadn't been stimulated enough. That was why his teacher, the golden-winged rock, hadn't allowed him to condense the divine nation and step into the divine master realm. Otherwise, he might have stepped into the divine master realm before Yi Shiwen. This had also given the others an opportunity to take advantage of. However, after experiencing this incident, his bloodline was also completely stimulated. It was only a matter of time before he condensed a 90% divine kingdom. As the saying went, misfortune may not be a blessing in disguise. This was the case. It was a blessing in disguise for him. He had cultivated the young Kun Peng single-handedly. Naturally, Yi Shiwen was extremely happy. It was like a parent watching their child's progress. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. Yi Shiwen quickly adjusted himself. Ever since he started cultivating, he had seen too many peerless geniuses with various bloodlines. However, most of them had already been trampled underfoot by him. Therefore, he was not very concerned. Very soon, the young Kun Peng went elsewhere to condense his divine kingdom. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen was still deducing the heavenly Tao law step by step and continuously asking the Flame Lord about various aspects of cultivation. He was preparing for the final sprint. He was not anxious. He knew that he could not be anxious. This concerned whether he would have a chance to attain Tao in the future. He had to be careful. Time passed day by day in this process. In the blink of an eye, more than 300 years had passed quietly. More than half of the Kerfurst Road had been opened. Just like in the past, other than those monstrous geniuses who were still high up above and occupied everyone's attention, the heroes of the current generation had also begun to rise rapidly in these 300 years. They began to appear frequently in the eyes of the public. Among them, the peerless genius of the Ji family, Ji Xianwang, was the most outstanding. He had practically swept away all his opponents. Until now, he had rarely been defeated. Many famous experts of the current generation had been swept away by him. Before this, almost no one knew about him. This was because he had always been in the ancestral land of the human race. The place was isolated from the rest of the world. Even if any genius had appeared, it would not have spread to the outside world. However, as soon as he appeared, he displayed a momentum of sweeping away everyone and quickly became famous. In fact, many people even compared him to the second Ji Renwang. Although they belonged to different inheritances, they were indeed descendants of the Ji family. This was a family that had once been endlessly glorious. The powerful figures that had emerged from it were incalculable. No one dared to underestimate the descendants of this family. Moreover, unlike Ji Renwang, although they both had the inheritance of an emperor, Ji Xuanwang's inheritance seemed to be more authentic. His inheritance seemed to be more tyrannical. All of this made the comparison between the two even more confusing. Chapter 2549. One was the only descendant of the Qin emperor to step into the realm since ancient times, and the other was a peerless genius that had been carefully cultivated by the emperor's clan that had produced many powerful emperors. Especially since both of them were from the Ji clan, this made this battle even more the focus of everyone's attention. Both of them had shown invincible talents that far surpassed their peers, but they were not from the same era, otherwise such a comparison would have started a long time ago. Later, Ji Xianwang even said that he wanted to compete with Ji Renwang, which pushed this battle into the eye of the storm, and the two of them suddenly became the targets of comparison. It also became the topic of many people after meals. Compared to Ji Xianwang, who was pressing forward step by step and showing off his abilities, Ji Renwang did not respond even once, as if he had no interest in such a comparison at all. In addition to Ji Xianwang, Zhu Yin, of the Vermilion Bird clan, another genius disciple of the Hidden Valley, Jun Dingtian, the genius of the Dragon clan, Ao Chaozong, and Wu Ziyu, who had reappeared, as well as the young Kunping, who had officially stepped into the Sage Realm, had all made a great name for themselves. Although they could not be compared to those monstrous geniuses, they were enough to compete with many of the older generation, so they were also very famous. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen, who had only been famous for a while a few hundred years ago, seemed to be gradually forgotten. After all, that was a few hundred years ago. Although his achievements back then were glorious, they seemed to be nothing compared to the many experts now emerging one after another. His limelight was gradually overshadowed by many new geniuses of the current generation. Although no one would think that he had declined, the so-called number one person of the current generation began to be doubted by more and more people. After all, he was the only one in the past, but now, as the Kerfurst Road had been open for more than half of the time, the geniuses of the current generation had also begun to show their strength, and they began to be able to challenge the experts of the older generation. Although it was not enough to compete with those monstrous geniuses, it was enough to make them famous for a while. Most importantly, when many people appeared on the Kerfurst Road, Yi Shiwen did not move at all, as if he had disappeared. As such, a rumor began to spread in the dark. Back then, Yi Shiwen had burned his life force to fight with that peerless sword. Now, he had been recovering from his injuries for hundreds of years. It was impossible for an eternal plane cultivator to kill a cultivator at the pinnacle of the sage plane without paying a price. It was just a matter of how much he had to pay. Yishuan hadn't come out for hundreds of years. It could be seen that his injuries weren't light. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disappeared for hundreds of years. There were all kinds of rumors about this, but Yishuan didn't reply even once. It seemed as if he had acquiesced to this matter. Yishuan slowly exhaled a mouthful of air inside a base in the hidden valley. All the magic power in his body had shrunk. One might even think that he was an ordinary person if they were to casually look at him. In these 300 years, he had gained a lot. With the Flame Master by his side, he could ask anything he didn't understand. This saved him a lot of effort. Most importantly, he could save a lot of God's source. In these 300 years, he had been constantly deducing the heavenly laws. At the same time, he had also deduced many of the essentials of forming a divine nation. It was almost as if he had done it once, and he was very clear about it. His understanding of the laws had reached an unprecedented level. It was important to know that a divine nation had very high requirements for a god's understanding of the laws. The deeper the understanding, the more powerful the divine nation would be. It was only now that he finally had complete confidence. This time, he couldn't afford to fail, and he couldn't afford to have any setbacks. This was related to whether or not he could break through to the Emperor's path in the future. Although it seemed a little far away, he felt that it was time to start preparing. He held his breath and focused his mind. The magic power in his body was released bit by bit. The magic power was attached to the laws, and it expanded around his body inch by inch, forming a divine nation. Everything was going very smoothly. In these 300 years, he had been constantly simulating forming a divine nation. Through the deductions of the mysterious space, he was already very confident. However, he still didn't dare to relax in the slightest. Every law had to be reconstructed in his divine kingdom. The higher the degree of restoration, the more powerful the divine kingdom would be. Naturally, he didn't dare to relax in the slightest. At this time, he couldn't afford to be the slightest bit disturbed. The many masters of the Hidden Valley who were originally stationed here had all been sent away by the Lord of Flames. He himself also left directly. The entire secret territory base had been sealed by him. Unless they attacked from the inside, even a peak sage realm expert would not be able to open it. Because of this, it would not have become the base of the Hidden Valley otherwise. The construction of every law required a lot of time. Another 50 years had passed, and Yishuan had finally completed the construction of the last principle. A huge divine nation emerged in the entire secret territory, even covering the entire secret territory. In the sky, countless clouds began to condense. Yishuan finally breathed a sigh of relief. His nerves had been tense for a full 50 years, and he finally completed the construction of the divine nation. He didn't dare to relax at all. Many gods even spent tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, to finally complete the construction of the divine nation. Everyone knew very well that this step was very important, and the one thing that the gods lacked the least was time. Therefore, very few people would be able to complete this step so quickly. It only took 50 years for them to completely condense the God of creation. However, Yishuan didn't rush it. Instead, he had been frantically calculating and making preparations for the past hundreds of years. There was also the deduction of the mysterious space, which was more complete than the average person who had been condensing for thousands of years. A completed divine nation was infinitely close to a small world. There were even people who directly treated a world as their own divine nation. This might increase the power, but in the process of building the divine nation, the laws comprehended were something that they would never be able to experience. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Countless thunderbolts fell. The moment his divine nation was formed, the thunder of the sage realm finally fell. Whoosh! His divine kingdom instantly unfolded around him. At this moment, his divine kingdom was like a world of primal chaos that had yet to open. Countless lightning bolts struck it, and it seemed to undergo the most miraculous transformation. Then, it was swallowed by his divine kingdom. It was covered by a great array all year round. Even a god couldn't come close to this place. Kid, hand over the divine weapon, or you'll die a tragic death today. A giant man with the head of a leopard materialized out of thin air. His entire body was silvery white, and it was also a special bloodline that was very powerful. His spirit was firmly locked on Yi Shiwen, as if he was afraid that he would escape. What divine tool? I don't know. Yi Shiwen shook his head and said, Brat, don't play dumb. Don't think that we don't know. At this moment, an old man wearing a cloak appeared and said coldly, We have all received the news that there will be a superb divine weapon born here. Although we don't know how you got in, don't try to deceive us. Yi Shiwen could clearly see that among these people, these two were the strongest. They had probably reached the late stage of the sage realm. Yes, heavenly tribulation. How can it not be the birth of a superb divine weapon? You want to keep the superb divine weapon for yourself? Aren't you afraid of being too full? Obediently hand over the superb divine weapon, or today will be the day of your death. There were many echoes around. It seemed that they had already determined this fact. You guys are crazy. I don't have time to care about you now. Get lost, Yi Shiwen said coldly. Brat, don't be too arrogant. Obediently hand it over. It won't do you any harm. A person should know how much he can bear and how much he can bear. The old man in the cloak said sinisterly. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly and said, Although I don't know where you got the news, I don't have the superb divine weapon that you want here. Of course, he had the superb divine weapon, but it was definitely not the superb divine weapon that they said was about to be born. The eyes of these gods were a little red. Even if they were gods, they could not calm down when faced with the temptation of a top-grade divine artifact. This might be a chance to change their fate. What's there to talk about with him? Just kill him and take the divine weapon. At this time, the man with the leopard head could not bear it anymore. Although he looked rude, he was not stupid. If this continued, when the news of the superb divine weapon leaked, there might be Sage Realm experts at the peak, or even monsters involved. At that time, they would have nothing to do with it. I think you guys have really gone crazy. A cold, killing intent flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. He had already made up his mind to kill. Although he didn't know where this rumor came from, he thought that if he didn't kill today, these guys wouldn't believe that there was no such thing as the birth of a top-grade divine tool. However, his heart was even heavier. This news could not have spread for no reason. After all, these were all gods, and each one of them was a fool. It was impossible for them to be so fanatical about something that was obviously a rumor. Kill! The man with the leopard head shouted. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. He slapped Yi Shiwen, and a cruel smile appeared in his eyes. It seemed that he had already confirmed that he could slap Yi Shiwen to death. On the other side, the old man in the cloak also hurriedly followed. He directly stretched out his skinny claws, smashed the sky, and pressed down on Yi Shiwen. The two of them fought to be the first to attack. They were afraid that the superb divine weapon would be snatched away by others first. In the face of a superb divine weapon, even a cultivator in the king level could not remain calm, let alone them. Having a superb divine weapon would undoubtedly increase their combat power, and their status would rise a lot. At this time, everyone also came to their senses. They hurriedly flew out from behind the layers of space. In an instant, hundreds of figures appeared in the sky like hundreds of meteors, and then rushed towards Yi Shiwen. You guys are really tired of living, Yi Shiwen sneered. Suddenly, a shocking sword intention appeared in his hand. This sword intention instantly turned into a sharp sword, and he suddenly brandished it. A shocking sword chi, like the first ray of sunlight in the world, sprinkled out. However, what it brought was not hope, but terrifying destruction. Compared to hundreds of years ago, Yi Shiwen's strength had already reached an unprecedented level. It was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Even a cultivator in the late stage of the Sage Realm was no match for him at all. They could not withstand a single blow, and numbers were of no use to him at all. Every point of this sword chi was composed of sword talismans, and it was extremely powerful. The sword chi surged out, tearing the sky apart. In an instant, it enveloped the leopard-headed man and the cloaked old man who had rushed over first. How could this be? The sword chi that the leopard-headed man had slashed out had instantly broken his attack. He was shocked. The shield of vigor all over his body had been broken, and the low-grade divine armor that he was wearing had also exploded under the pressure of the sword will. It had not even hit his body, and it was already so terrifying. If it were to hit him, what would the result be? He did not dare to imagine what would happen. In an instant, he had already reacted and retreated. However, it was too late for him to retreat at this time. The sword chi had already slashed his body. Bang! His physical body began to explode continuously. The sword chi was tearing all the cells in his body, causing his reconstituted cells to explode again. The cloaked old man was not much better. His entire cloak exploded, revealing a skinny body. This body had long been enveloped by the sword chi, and it was blown to pieces. Bang! Bang! The two of them were blasted away, and they were severely injured in just one move. Such a brutal thing instantly shocked many who were still tempted to make a move. It made them sober all at once, as if a basin of cold water had been poured over them. They felt a chill from head to toe. What a joke! Although supreme divine weapons were rare, and they were fatally tempting, one had to be alive to enjoy them. The young man in front of them, who looked so ordinary, did not expect him to be so ruthless. He had just made a move, and he had severely injured the two most powerful cultivators at the peak of the Sage Realm with just one move, beating them like dogs. Many people were still in such shock that they could not react. Many people even continued to rush forward, and then directly rushed into the storm of swordsmanship. Then, it was a complete tragedy. There were immortal-level gods who reacted a little too late and rushed in. As a result, their entire body was cut into a bloody pulp by the storm of swordsmanship. Their souls were destroyed, and there was no chance for them to be resurrected. Those who had just barely stopped sucked in a breath of cold air. The sound of people sucking in cold air could be heard everywhere. Many people were instantly covered in cold sweat. They almost walked out of the gates of hell early in the morning. At this time, in their eyes, the young man in front of them was not a human at all, but a demon, a grim reaper, who could easily reap their lives. It was as if the two of them were not on the same level of life at all. How can he be so strong? Someone said in a trembling voice. Chapter 2551. It was normal for a battle between gods to go on for thousands of years. To be able to kill them with a single strike meant that the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even the leopard-headed man and the cloaked elder, who were the strongest among them, were dumbfounded. They were severely injured before they could even react. Their bodies seemed to have been shrouded by thousands of sword auras, destroying them in a frenzy. It looked extremely terrifying. Roar! That leopard-headed man instantly rose from the ground and transformed into a huge silver-white leopard. It seemed as if it was cast from gold and iron and was full of power. He took a step forward and broke through the sky and quickly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. He spouted an astonishing amount of energy, and a mighty energy frenzy blasted towards Yi Shiwen. He was not willing to admit defeat. He did not want to lose. Yi Shiwen only smirked coldly. A huge sword aura appeared in his hand. It was the sword aura of the Dominator. Dominator of the world. The sword aura of the Dominator in his hand swept out, tearing through the endless sky. It blasted the wave of energy that the silver-white leopard spat out into pieces, and it did not lose any of its momentum. It slammed into the body of the silver-white leopard. Boom! The silver-white leopard turned into a cloud of blood mist on the spot. Even though he was at the late stage of the Sage Plane, which was infinitely close to the pinnacle of the Sage Plane, he could not withstand being severely injured twice. If Yi Shiwen had held back before, then he did not hold back at all this time. He slashed down with his sword, shattering the sky. He would not have been able to do this hundreds of years ago, as he was bound by the imperishable plane. But now his strength had long surpassed those people, and he was just that overbearing. Some of the weaker gods around him could not help but kneel, bowing deeply under the Dominator's sword will. Once the Dominator's sword was unleashed, it would completely conquer the world. Yi Shiwen glanced at the cloaked old man, and the cloaked old man's whole body suddenly trembled. The ferocious appearance of Yi Shiwen beheading that silver leopard with one sword strike had been deeply imprinted in his mind, and he couldn't get rid of it. It was as if he had seen the most terrifying devil king in hell. How is this possible? How can someone be this strong? He screamed in his mind, unable to believe it. The unassuming young man before him was only at the early stage of the sage plane, which was 2 levels lower than him. However, when they really fought, he was beaten like a dead dog. Those 2 sword attacks had completely destroyed the defenses in his heart. No, don't kill me. He was so scared that his entire body was trembling. Ever since he became a god, he had never been so close to death as he was today. Yi Shiwen withdrew his sword intention and didn't continue to kill. Although he was decisive in killing and didn't mind killing people, but he wasn't tyrannical enough to kill indiscriminately. If you want me to spare your life, that's fine, but you have to answer a few of my questions, Yi Shiwen said lightly. Senior, please speak. Senior, please speak. I will tell you everything I know. The cloaked old man knelt on the ground and hurriedly said. This made Yi Shiwen somewhat surprised. This cloaked old man was unexpectedly tactful. Let me ask you one question. Who told you that a top-grade divine tool would appear here? Yi Shiwen asked. This question made many people look at each other, and they seemed to be a little confused. Many of them followed the crowd and came here because everyone said with certainty that there was a supreme-grade artifact here. But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed that no one really knew where the news came from. But at this time, they thought that there was no such thing as a top-grade divine tool here. It was clearly a top-grade god of death here. Thinking of this, they gritted their teeth in hatred. If it weren't for someone spreading rumors, how would they have come to personally commit the crime? Fortunately, the god of death in front of them didn't seem to be very bloodthirsty. Otherwise, wouldn't they be dead? Many of them were extremely glad, but they were also desperately thinking in their hearts. It was not only because they wanted to survive, but more importantly, they wanted to find the damn guy, the guy who put them in danger. They also wanted to let him know how terrifying this top-grade god of death was. I know, the cloaked old man said, trembling. Speak. Yi Shiwen faintly had a feeling that this matter was aimed at him, so he also wanted to see who was targeting him. The cloaked old man said in a trembling voice, We heard it from the followers of Jun Dingtian in the Hidden Valley. Jun Dingtian, Yi Shiwen said coldly. He didn't have any doubts when he heard this name. If it was Jun Dingtian, then everything would make sense. Why was it clearly targeting him? Moreover, this was the secret territory of the Hidden Valley. It was regarded as a foothold of the Hidden Valley in the Kurfürst Road. It was not known to outsiders, and only the people inside the Hidden Valley might know about it. Jun Dingtian was also an outstanding master cultivated by the Hidden Valley. In many people's opinion, the only master who could be compared with him in the Hidden Valley was Jun Dingtian. He could also guess Jun Dingtian's plan. He did not know where he found out that he was about to break through, so he sent people to find trouble with him, and even wanted to push the blame away. However, he never expected that Yi Shiwen would be so strong after breaking through. The so-called masters that he secretly encouraged were no match for Yi Shiwen at all, and were defeated in 2 or 3 moves. Moreover, they were clearly too late. Yi Shiwen had already broken through before they came. Yes, it's them. I dare not lie, the old man said while gnashing his teeth. However, he didn't hate Yi Shiwen. Instead, he hated the subordinate of Jun Dingtian who had passed the message to him. He had been fooled by Jun Dingtian's subordinate. He had called Jun Dingtian a brother, but the result was that Jun Dingtian had tricked him. It was intolerable. Just nice. Let this god of death find trouble with them. Originally, they did not want to offend Jun Dingtian, who was the future leader of the Hidden Valley. The future of these people was limitless, and no one knew how far they could go in the future. If they were to offend them, it would not be difficult to kill them in the future. Even their followers would not dare to do anything to them. They did not expect that they would be tricked like this after treating others with sincerity. I understand. Since this matter has nothing to do with you, I will let you go today. Yishuan did not bother to say anything more. He immediately took a big step forward, stepped on the sky full of sword chi, and disappeared in an instant. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure that Yi Shiwen had put on them was too great. It was so great that they felt suffocated. Even though he did not release any aura, the style of the sword was enough to make them not dare to have the slightest thought of resisting. This person is so powerful. He is only in the early stage of the Sage Realm, but he can actually slaughter experts in the late stage of the Sage Realm like slaughtering chickens and dogs. It is impossible that he is not famous. He must be a monster that we do not know. At this time, someone could not help but say at this time, touching his back that was already cold. It immediately resonated with everyone. How could such a person be ordinary? If they were all ordinary people in the Sage Realm, then they might as well kill themselves. Although most of them were not as powerful as the leopard-headed man, in fact, they were still very strong, and there was no lack of experts in the Sage Realm among them. Ah, I remember. Is this Yi Shiwen, the one who went missing hundreds of years ago and claimed to be the #1 expert of this generation? Someone suddenly recalled the memory of Yi Shiwen in their mind. Hundreds of years ago, Yi Shiwen had become famous for a time. His paintings had also spread along with his fame. Therefore, many people had heard about him. Many people knew about him. Of course, he wasn't so famous that everyone had to know him. So, it is him. No wonder he is so strong. What a strong aura. Hundreds of years ago, he killed several masters at the pinnacle of the Sage Realm, let alone now. It's already good enough that we were able to escape from his hands. Many people could not help but rejoice. They all remembered Yi Shiwen's past achievements. Indeed, compared to the experts at the peak of the Sage Realm that Yi Shiwen had killed, they were nothing at all. Thinking of this, their mood immediately became much better. It was not that they were too weak, but that their opponent was too strong. Even experts at the peak of the Sage Realm had fallen in his hands, let alone them. At this time, they even had a feeling that being defeated by Yi Shiwen had become a vaguely glorious thing. At this time, many rumors about Yi Shiwen also came to mind. Who said that Yi Shiwen has declined? He can't do it anymore? This is called, he can't do it anymore? Whoever dares to say such things to me in the future, I will kill him with one slap. Someone said indignantly. Thinking of the rumors about Yi Shiwen, many of them said that he could not do it anymore. Now that they thought about it, it was such a ridiculous thing. Whoever dared to say that Yi Shiwen could not do it again, let him try to take a sword from Yi Shiwen himself. At this time, these people had unknowingly become Yi Shiwen's loyal fans. It seemed that this would make their defeat look better. At least, they wouldn't lose to a weakling. Instead, they would lose to a matchless powerhouse. But isn't Jun Dingtian also a disciple from the Hidden Valley? Why? Someone suddenly realized this problem, as if he had touched upon something extraordinary. Could it be that they are not on good terms? Chapter 2552. Yi Shiwen had already left the place, while those who came looking for trouble were still deeply impressed by Yi Shiwen's fearsomeness. Although this place had been discovered, there was no need to worry that it would be broken by the formations left in the Hidden Valley. Moreover, after he left, the guards of the Hidden Valley would also return. It was nothing more than turning from darkness to light. However, he was not a person who would swallow humiliation. This incident reminded him that Jun Dingtian would be a disaster if he was left alive. Jun Dingtian was like a poisonous snake in the dark, and he could be bitten at any time. However, Jun Dingtian was now also a disciple of the Hidden Valley, and his reputation was not small. Those old antiques in the Hidden Valley would certainly not allow him to attack him, and vice versa. Therefore, Jun Dingtian could only play some small tricks this time, and did not dare to come in person. Otherwise, not to mention those extremely powerful king-level powerhouses, even the Flame Lord was not someone they could deal with. To get rid of Jun Dingtian, he must come up with a comprehensive plan. Although he could not directly kill him now, he could find trouble with him. Dazzling City was a very large city in the greater One Heaven. Many forces and races had a foothold here, and naturally, there were many figures of the Hidden Valley among them. Jun Dingtian could know that he was in closed-door training through the internal information network of the Hidden Valley, and vice versa. He could also find out where Jun Dingtian was. However, even if the seniors who shared the information with him were excluded, they would never have thought that the information would be used in this aspect within 2 days. In particular, every time the Kurfürst Road opened, Dazzling City would restore its glory in a very short time and become an important transit station in the Greater One Heaven. In addition, there were many indigenous creatures that originally lived here, which made the city even more lively and lively. Yi Shiwen soon arrived at Dazzling City. The city walls of Dazzling City were thousands of feet high, and there were countless formations carved on it. However, after so many years, it had also left behind many vicissitudes of time, and some traces of weathering and cracks were inevitable. Yi Shiwen walked along the main road, and there were all kinds of hawking and discussions around him. It was very lively. Recently, it is said that another earth dragon was found in the secret territory, and then it was later subdued by a demon. What a pity! It is said that even the demon fought for 3 days and 3 nights before finally subduing that earth dragon. There are too many secret lands on the Kurfürst Road. I heard that the broken yuan fruit has appeared, and everyone went crazy. Is it the origin-shattering fruit that can shatter a god's primordial spirit just by swallowing a little? That's right, it's that thing. Even if a divine master of the sage plane accidentally swallowed a bit of it, his primordial spirit would shatter, and he would die. It's really powerful, but it's a pity that he managed to escape in the end. It seems to have gained sentience. In the city, all kinds of news were circulating. No one knew whether it was true or not, but in an instant, a huge amount of information rushed over. The geniuses of this generation are finally starting to grow up. Although they are still not comparable to those monstrous geniuses, it is only a matter of time. That's right. Every generation will produce some amazing figures. As long as they don't fall, there will always be new monstrous geniuses among them. In this generation, I'm afraid that Ji Xianwang will be hard-pressed to find an opponent. His eyes are no longer on his peers. It is said that his target in the Kurfürst Road is only his clan brother, Ji Renwang. Unless the monstrous geniuses make a move, I'm afraid that no one is his opponent. Not only is his talent extremely high, but he was also born in such an illustrious clan like the Ji family. Also, do you know why he is called Ji Xianwang? It is said that when he was just born, the qi of heaven and earth fell from the sky, and his physical body seems to have been baptized by the qi of heaven and earth, turning into a real holy body of heaven and earth. Since ancient times, it is said that only Saint Emperor Xinyuan was born with this kind of body, and it is said that he has the qualifications to become an emperor. It is hard to say whether one can achieve the Tao or not. Many people claim to have the qualifications to achieve the Tao, but in reality, only a few can achieve it. However, his battle record is indeed brilliant, comparable to Ji Renwang's existence in the last Kurfürst Road. With the deterrence of the emperor family, I believe that no one will dare to do anything to him, and it is almost impossible for him to die prematurely. His future achievements are limitless. He can be considered very strong. Not only does he dare to challenge Ji Renwang, but he has also never lost in the competition between his peers, and won many times. There is also Zhu Yin, of the Vermilion Bird clan. Her brother is already a monstrous genius, and I never expected that such a genius would be born in her clan, as expected of one of the legendary Force symbols. Everyone sighed with emotion, because not every powerful clan had someone who could become such a monstrous genius in every generation. It was extremely normal for such a monstrous genius to not be born in several generations. Ao Chaozong of the Dragon Clan is also not bad. Although I heard that he was defeated, he had not entered the Sage Realm at that time. Now that more than 1,000 years have passed, the outcome of the battle is still unknown. However, you have all missed one person, and that is Yi Shiwen, who defeated Ao Chaozong. Someone mentioned a name, and suddenly many people fell silent. None of you mentioned it, and even I have somewhat forgotten about it. He was known as the first person of this generation hundreds of years ago, and his power was limitless. There is a rumor that he is already dead, otherwise there would be no news of him for hundreds of years. That should not be the case. Otherwise, the news from the Hidden Valley would have spread out long ago. If he is said to be the first person of this generation, I am afraid that he does not live up to his name now, but to say that he has declined is not to the extent of it. If he has not fallen behind now, he should also be one of the strongest people of this generation. At the very least, hundreds of years ago, he was indeed the first person of this generation. That is just because there is no tiger in the mountain. The monkey is king. There were also people who disdained Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was also too lazy to win the championship, regardless of the fact that they were just some small characters. However, he also heard some secrets from the conversations of the crowd. Every time this happened, the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power were often particularly expensive. In a short period of 1,000 years, if the geniuses of this generation wanted to catch up with those monstrous geniuses, they could only improve rapidly in a short period of time. In this way, the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power were particularly expensive. It could be said that as long as someone could sell the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power, they would be able to get a good return. This further stimulated the rising prices of the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power in the Kurfürst Road. No wonder these people improved so quickly. It turns out that they are secretly purchasing the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power. Yi Shiwen calculated for a while. Although he had the heavenly treasures that could increase one's power, he did not have many of them. The fire essence was one of them, and the golden-backed dragon carp king was still in a deep sleep. When he bought it back in the past, it had just started to evolve. Now, it had almost evolved. However, in the process, it had already swallowed 1 billion divine source. Although Yi Shiwen felt a little heartache, he endured it. After all, compared to the power that the golden-backed dragon carp could increase in the end, 1 billion divine source was nothing. Although 1 billion divine source could buy a lot of things, it could not buy a direct improvement in power. Yi Shiwen asked someone about the location of the strongholds in the monarch's genius city. In the Kurfürst Road, the majority of the strongholds were from the major sects, and those monstrous geniuses had also built many strongholds, with many followers among them. As for those who had just risen up like Jun Dingtian, there would not be many strongholds. At most, there would be 1 or 2. And in the dazzling city, there was one of his strongholds. Why are you asking about his stronghold? Are you going to buy some magical materials that can increase power for him? The person asked curiously. Yi Shiwen shook his head, but did not deny it. But many of Jun Dingtian's followers have been collecting magical materials that can increase power recently. I've just got a 100,000-year-old light source. TSK. That's the essence of endless light. It's 10,000 years old, but in fact, it might have been formed for more than 100,000 years. It's all essence. The person said in amazement. A few rays of light flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. Light source was a good thing. It could be said to be one of the best among all the heavenly treasures. In the myriad worlds, many creatures would habitually absorb the essence of the sun and the moon when they were cultivating. This was because sunlight and moonlight contained a special kind of essence. Absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon for a long time would definitely make rapid progress in power. Under certain special circumstances, the essence of the sun and the moon, which should have been scattered in the world, would condense and form the light source. This kind of light source was very precious because it could only be formed under very special circumstances. Even if it was only 100 years old, there would be deities who would fight for it. Even the masters of the eternal realm would be completely excited. One could well imagine how precious a 10,000-year-old source of light was. I have an old friendship with him. Today, I'm here to catch up with him. Yi Shiwen said with a cold smile. It just so happens that a 10,000-year-old light source is hard to come by. I'm so lucky. The person looked at Yi Shiwen strangely. Even if a 10,000-year-old light source was indeed very rare, it had nothing to do with him. Even if it was luck, it should be Jun Dingtian's luck. Moreover, Jun Dingtian had spent a lot of money to buy a 10,000-year-old light source. The price was shocking. But he was kind enough to point out the location of Jun Dingtian's stronghold in the city to Yi Shiwen. Looking at Yi Shiwen's back as he left, the person suddenly felt that the person in front of him seemed a little familiar. But for a moment, he couldn't remember where he had seen him. To be able to claim to have an old friendship with a genius like Jun Dingtian, this person should not be unknown. However, he soon found out who this person was. Chapter 2553. Yi Shiwen went straight to the front of Jun Dingtian's stronghold. It was a huge palace, but it was far more than that. There was another world inside, with a powerful formation supporting another small space that was connected to this place. "Stop right there!" A deep voice came from the void. Yi Shiwen ignored it and continued to walk forward. "Are you provoking the Hidden Valley?" The man's voice suddenly became majestic, and an imposing aura crushed down from all directions. "Provoking the Hidden Valley? Do you think Jun Dingtian can represent the Hidden Valley? What a joke!" Yi Shiwen sneered slightly, with his hands behind his back, and strode in. At this time, a young man walked out. It was the man who spoke before. His whole body was golden, as if he was cast in gold. He looked incomparably majestic. Yi Shiwen opened the eyes of redemption, and instantly saw through the body of this young man. He was probably similar to Wu Ziyu and the Wu Zimo brothers, an innate stone embryo, a life born from amazing divine materials. It could be regarded as a very extraordinary origin. "It seems that you are not here with good intentions." "Another arrogant person," the young man sneered, and his golden face was filled with a sense of ridicule. He had seen too many people like this. Since Jun Dingtian became famous, there were too many people who wanted to step on Jun Dingtian's head. He couldn't even count them. He didn't know how many arrogant people he had suppressed. It was really boring, Yi Shiwen said coldly. "It seems that there are a lot of people who don't like Jun Dingtian and want to cause trouble. They all have tragic endings. I have killed many of them. Let me give you a word of advice. You better leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, when I take action, don't even think of leaving your corpse behind." The young man warned. "I'd like to see what kind of tragic end awaits me. It just so happens that I've heard that you've recently collected a mass of light essence. This thing and I are fated to be together. So, I should be the one to obtain it." Yi Shiwen grinned, revealing his big white teeth. "What? Haha, are you crazy?" the young man said with his eyes wide open. He had seen people who overestimated themselves and wanted to challenge Jun Dingtian, but he had never seen a lunatic who wanted to challenge Jun Dingtian. "This item is fated with me." Why do these words sound so ironic? Yi Shiwen could feel that the surrounding divine senses were coming from the main hall. They were quite unfriendly. He had already realized that he had come to look for trouble. Yes, he had come to look for trouble. This is not something you can decide. If you leave now, I can spare your lives, Yi Shiwen said with a calm look on his face. "Who do you think you are? How dare you say such words in front of me? Our Lord is about to come out of seclusion. At that time, he will be invincible. Suppressing you will be as easy as lifting a hand." That person sneered. "I think you've really lost your mind. You want to see the Lord? I see that you are also a hero of this generation, and your background is also extraordinary. Why do you want to be his dog?" He could see that this person in front of him should be one of Jun Dingtian's followers. This man was talented and had the potential to become a titled lord. Now that he had been taken in by Jun Dingtian and became his follower, it meant that he had been developing well recently. "You're courting death." The young man's face suddenly changed. Although he claimed to be Jun Dingtian's followers, he had actually become Jun Dingtian's servants. He didn't become Jun Dingtian's follower willingly. He was forced to become Jun Dingtian's follower after being beaten by Jun Dingtian. Now, Yi Shiwen's words were tantamount to opening a scar in his heart. Suddenly, endless golden light burst out from under his feet, instantly surging into a golden sea, instantly alarming the entire city. Originally, according to the agreement between the major forces, fighting was generally not allowed within the city. Otherwise, the city would have been destroyed. Even if there were countless barriers set up, it would not be able to withstand such a battle between deities every 2 or 3 days. However, he had the backing of the Hidden Valley and Jun Dingtian. He had no scruples at all and attacked in an instant. Buzz! A golden light slashed down, causing the sky to tremble. His 5 fingers had turned into a blade aura. This attack was extremely powerful, with speed and strength rarely seen in the world. Why is it him again? This is the 3rd time this month. Why are there so many people who don't know what's good for them? They want to step on those who are famous. What an idiot. Those people can kill their way out of the endless geniuses and become famous on the Kerfers Road. Is this all fake? Why don't they think about it? It really makes me speechless. Some people saw this scene, but they were not surprised. It seemed that this situation had happened many times. Yes, although he is only a follower of Jun Dingtian, in terms of strength, I'm afraid that he has surpassed many of the older generation. If he was not taken in by Jun Dingtian, his future achievements will be limitless. It is not impossible for him to enter the titled Lord realm. This attack is really terrifying. I'm afraid there are not many in the Sage realm who can withstand such an attack. Many people had noticed Yi Shiwen's existence. They felt that he looked somewhat familiar. However, they couldn't remember where they had seen him. They had vaguely seen him somewhere before. This attack made the entire dazzling city start to shake. It was like a huge firework was blooming, beautiful, and dazzling. In everyone's opinion, whether or not Yi Shiwen could withstand this blow was a big problem. However, they saw an amazing scene. Yi Shiwen just raised his hand. He didn't even circulate his martial power. But that amazing golden light beam blasted into his hand. However, it couldn't move forward even a little bit. This terrifying attack that could destroy an entire world was actually easily blocked by him. Furthermore, such an attack could not even move his body in the slightest. How is this possible? Everyone was dumbfounded. They were completely dumbfounded. They had never seen such a strong existence. He did not even move and easily blocked such a terrifying attack. The young man's pupils suddenly shrank. He was not stupid. On the contrary, he was also the kind of person who was called a genius. He immediately realized that the guy in front of him, no matter what, was not someone to be trifled with. He did not dare to underestimate the person in front of him. Golden light burst from his eyes, as if 2 big suns exploded in his eyes. Whoosh! No one knew when, but his figure had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. His leg was like tearing lightning, completely smashing the sky, sweeping towards Yi Shiwen's head. Obviously, his martial arts were also very strong. Bang! This time, Yi Shiwen simply didn't move. All of his attacks stopped a foot away from Yi Shiwen's body. It seemed as if there was an invisible wall protecting him inside. How is this possible? The young man suddenly turned pale with fright. If it was said that the first time he made a move, he still underestimated his opponent and did not use his full strength. But this time, he clearly used his full strength, but he could not even break through the shield of vigor. He did not even need to think to know what this meant. This feeling was even more shocking than when he faced Jun Dingtian. Even when he faced Jun Dingtian, there had never been such a big gap, let alone a time when he was unable to fight back. The power of his leg broke out in an instant. In an instant, the collision between heaven and earth was riddled with holes. The terrible force spread out, causing the space to tremble violently like the surface of the water being blown by the wind. Everyone's expression changed. Such an attack strength, if it were them, would have been kicked into a pulp. What a terrifying gap it was that it could not even break this person's aura shield. That's enough. The young man wanted to launch another round of attacks, but Yi Shiwen would not give him the chance. In an instant, he made his move. His big hand suddenly swung out. The young man kept struggling, trying to escape, but his body seemed to be fixed by some force. He could not escape at all, and could only take a solid hit. Bang! His entire body spun rapidly, as if he was falling off. Like an arrow that had just left the bow, he slammed into the main hall. It was unknown how many arrays were shattered into dust in that instant. This power was not added with any true essence, but it was still shockingly powerful. More than half of the young man's body had been smashed into pieces. Blood flowed out, and it was a horrible sight. The previous majestic appearance was not seen at all. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. The entire city quieted down in an instant. Even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Everyone was shocked by Yi Shiwen's terrifying might. Although there was still a faint smile on his face, the meaning of it was completely different in everyone's eyes. Previously, he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, and that was courting death. But now, it represented absolute confidence. He had such strength, and he should have such confidence. Many people had a question in their hearts. Who on earth was this fierce man? He was simply ridiculously strong. Most importantly, everyone knew that this was the stronghold of Jun Dingtian. Not an ordinary person would have the guts to come and find trouble with Jun Dingtian. Yi Shiwen acted as if he did not see the young man wailing. He strode directly into the main hall. Yi Shiwen, what do you want? An old and angry voice came from the main hall. The whole city was shocked. What, he is Yi Shiwen? Chapter 2554. What? He's Yi Shiwen? Everyone felt as if they had been struck by lightning. This name was too famous. Although he had not appeared in public for hundreds of years, he had always been a topic of discussion. He had never really left the public eye. Hence, when his name appeared, everyone was surprised at first, but then they came to a sudden realization. If it was him, then perhaps he would really be able to do it. The battle that had taken place hundreds of years ago had left a deep impression on everyone, even though they had only caught a glimpse of it. Although there were some rumors saying that Yi Shiwen had suffered serious injuries and it would be difficult for him to recover, but the facts spoke louder than words. Yi Shiwen's tyrannical performance had defeated all the doubts about him. The so-called rumors that had been spreading for hundreds of years were ridiculous. It was not impossible to say that such a performance was the best in the current generation. What do I want? Yi Shiwen sneered and continued to walk inside. I heard that there is light essence here. This thing is faded with me, so I came to collect it. Everyone was speechless. This thing is faded with me, so I came to collect it. Why does this sound so strange? However, Yi Shiwen's performance had confirmed a rumor. The relationship between the two most outstanding geniuses of this generation in the Hidden Valley was very bad. It had even reached the point of being hostile. There had always been such a rumor, but they didn't care much about it because it was ridiculous. Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian weren't the only ones who didn't like each other. It was an unusual thing, so it wasn't strange at all. However, it seemed that the two of them were not on good terms with each other. They had probably gone against each other. This was somewhat unusual. Generally speaking, even if they disliked each other, they would not shed all pretense of cordiality in public. This was not a good thing for the entire sect. If the antique kings were to be embarrassed, they would naturally have a way to deal with these geniuses. Yi Shiwen had obviously come for Jun Dingtian. The so-called fate between him and the light source was just nonsense. Yi Shiwen, are you crazy? The old man's voice resounded. He was extremely angry. I'm crazy? Su Jun Dingtian is the only one who can scheme against me? It's really funny. A trace of anger finally appeared on Yi Shiwen's face, and he couldn't help but sneer. Don't talk nonsense today. Otherwise, I will demolish your stronghold. Otherwise, you will hand over the source of light. Yi Shiwen gave his final ultimatum. He was too lazy to act. Today, he was here to look for trouble, smash the place, and slap their faces. Are you trying to start an internal strife? Even your master won't let you off. The old man was still roaring angrily, as if he couldn't accept this at all. Yi Shiwen's eyes were cold, and he didn't answer. Where is Jun Dingtian? Why hasn't he come out yet? Don't tell me he's not here? Someone asked. They were looking forward to seeing a fierce collision between the two heroes of the Hidden Valley. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would slap his face until now? But Yi Shiwen still hadn't appeared. I'm afraid he's not in this stronghold. It's a pity. I thought I could see an earth-shattering collision between the two. Without someone like Jun Dingtian, I'm afraid we won't be able to test Yi Shiwen's current strength. Let's go. Let's all go together. We can't let him continue to be so arrogant. At this time, an expert in the hall roared. Although Jun Dingtian's people were not there, he had left many experts in the stronghold. At this time, They couldn't stand Yi Shiwen's insolence anymore. It was as if he was slapping their faces. Rumble! Many balls of light swept out from within, and more than a dozen powerful cultivators leaped out from within. Although only one of them was of the Sage Plane, such a lineup was still very powerful. Even a cultivator of the Sage Plane would probably have to temporarily avoid them. It was a pity that the person they met was not an ordinary person. They saw the laws intertwined on Yi Shiwen's body, surging out, and a powerful force rolled out. These people were blown away by this terrifying force before they could even get close. They flew backward, coughing up blood, and fell into the palace. Obviously, the experts that Jun Dingtian had left in this stronghold were no match for Yi Shiwen. They couldn't even stop him. At this time, the old man who was originally hidden in the hall finally couldn't help but show himself. He was not a subordinate of Jun Dingtian, but an old antique of the Hidden Valley who was now in charge. His face was livid, and he looked at Yi Shiwen angrily, as if he wanted to burn him alive. "Yi Shiwen," he said, gritting his teeth. Yi Shiwen said coldly, "Although you are a senior of the Hidden Valley, this is between me and Jun Dingtian. You'd better not interfere. Don't humiliate yourself." "What did you say?" The old man instantly became furious. Layers of scales appeared on his skin. He looked extremely ferocious. He had been thoroughly infuriated by Yi Shiwen's words. What did he mean by, "Don't humiliate yourself"? "I think you're really too arrogant." He pressed his palm down, and countless laws intertwined on his palm, setting off a terrible wind. He then slapped it down on Yi Shiwen. "I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." Yi Shiwen shouted coldly, and then blasted out a punch. The terrifying fist force in an instant transformed into endless laws, and the entire space seemed to be controlled by the fist force. Yi Shiwen then fiercely met the old man's attack. Bang! Both sides collided fiercely, and the boundless raging waves rolled out in all directions following the collision. It looked extremely sharp. Puff! The old man spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body retreated 5 or 6 steps before he managed to stop, leaving 5 or 6 huge footprints on the ground. It looked extremely ferocious. Impossible. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. This was completely different from the news he had received before. Yi Shiwen had not only stepped into the Sage Realm, but his skills were also terrifyingly profound. This was not the skill that someone who had just stepped into the Sage Realm should have at all. It was rumored that hundreds of years ago, he only relied on a mysterious ritual implement to kill those almighty gods at the peak of the Sage Realm. Now, it seemed that even if the rumors were true, they were somewhat discounted. At this moment, he recalled that all the rumors seemed to have completely diluted Yi Shiwen's combat power. In the rumors, Yi Shiwen's combat power seemed to be an insignificant thing, and what was really in the limelight was Yi Shiwen's peerless murder weapon. It seemed that everything else did not matter at all. It was unclear how many people were adding fuel to the fire. Even the people of Jun Dingtian were secretly adding fuel to the fire in order to suppress Yi Shiwen's prestige. The Kurfürst Road had only just begun, and he was already in the limelight. It would be terrible if this continued. It was just that as time passed, even they themselves began to believe such rumors, which led to today's tragedy. If Yi Shiwen was so easy to deal with, would Jun Dingtian have suffered so many losses in his hands? But it was a little too late to think about it now. "I gave you face, but you don't want it." Yi Shiwen's eyes were somewhat cold. He took a step forward and instantly rushed in front of the old man. "Who do you think you are? How dare you lecture me?" Slap! The old man was slapped by Yi Shiwen on the spot. His divine kingdom automatically appeared to defend himself. However, it was smashed by Yi Shiwen's big hand. It shattered inch by inch in front of everyone. Such a scene was indeed the most terrifying. Then, the old man's entire body flew backward, slamming into the wall. Everyone was silent, and everyone was looking forward to seeing what had happened. Yi Shiwen did not have the slightest sympathy, but only said coldly, "You'd better not let me know that those people who are looking for trouble with me have anything to do with you. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." With his current situation, if he had not completed his advancement to the Sage Realm in advance, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was really disturbed by those people. Failure to condense the divine kingdom would be a small matter, and he might even go berserk. This was also the reason why the Flame Lord had sent everyone else away. Yixuan only knew that this matter must have been planned by Jun Dingtian, but he did not know who the mastermind was. But it did not matter. They were just some small fries. He was only doing this to warn some of the old antiques in the Hidden Valley who had already turned to Jun Dingtian that he was not a good-tempered person and that they should not underestimate him. The killing intent in his heart was even more exuberant. In the future, the conflict between the two factions in the Hidden Valley would never end unless one of them died. At this moment, everyone knew why Yi Shiwen came looking for trouble angrily. It was likely that he had been tricked by Jun Dingtian previously, and now he was here to get back at them. Yi Shiwen went straight in. At this moment, everyone was isolated by the barrier of the hall and could not see what was going on inside. They only saw his figure disappear into the shadow of the hall. In an instant, there was an uproar. Really, he is so strong. No wonder he was called the first leader of this generation for hundreds of years. At the very least, his strength is far beyond our imagination. That's right, there will be a good show now. The two heroes of the Hidden Valley are not on good terms, and I wonder what the higher-ups of the Hidden Valley will do. The only pity is that we did not see Jun Dingtian appear. Otherwise, today's conflict would have been even more intense. But it is only a matter of time. How can he be so strong? I did not even see his movements clearly just now, and he had already ended the battle. That old guy probably has the strength and level of the Sage Realm late stage, but in front of him, he was beaten like a dead dog. The gap is too big. Is this the gap between ordinary people and those monsters? Chapter 2555. Yi Shiwen went straight into the main hall. In the main hall, experts were rolling on the ground, wailing. Although Yi Shiwen didn't kill them, it was enough to seriously injure them. At this moment, they were looking at Yi Shiwen with hatred in their eyes, wailing incessantly. Yi Shiwen, don't be arrogant. When the Lord comes out, it will be your doomsday. Someone kept roaring. Yi Shiwen didn't even look at them. They were just a bunch of defeated dogs barking from afar. He went straight into the depths of the main hall and opened the treasury. All kinds of magic materials were exposed in front of Yi Shiwen. These were the magic materials that Jun Dingtian and his subordinates had collected during this period of time. However, in Yi Shiwen's eyes, their quality was only considered average. Perhaps Jun Dingtian had already taken away all the good divine materials, but it was better than nothing. He roughly estimated that there were at least 1 billion divine sources, and he could sell them to the Lord of Flames when the time came. Among them, the most eye-catching one was the light source at the center of the treasury. The resplendent light illuminated the entire treasury and emitted a dense energy. It was the light essence. Yi Shiwen's eyes lit up. The light essence was precious, needless to say. Only under very harsh conditions, the essence of the world could not dissipate and could only be preserved. If he swallowed the light essence, he could gain a lot of martial power out of thin air. It was unlike the ordinary divine source, which could only be converted into spiritual power at most and couldn't really increase his martial power. Although he was almost tricked by Jun Dingtian this time, he must have gone crazy after robbing him of the light essence. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen couldn't help but feel a little happy. Yi Shiwen suddenly grabbed with his big hand and looted the entire treasure house, especially the light essence, which was taken away by him. No, you can't do this. The Lord will not let you go. At this moment, Jun Dingtian's followers were trembling and roaring. He won't let me go? I won't let him go. Let him come and find me, Yi Shiwen said coldly. At this moment, he couldn't wait for Jun Dingtian to come and find him. The sooner this scourge was eliminated, the better. In his mind, the first time he met Jun Dingtian, in his eyes at that time, Jun Dingtian was almost invincible, and he was lucky to win. Now that he thought about it, he was really lucky. One wrong step, and he would have died in Jun Dingtian's hands. But now, the situation had changed fundamentally. It's a pity. There's nothing good except the light essence. How stingy! Yi Shiwen shook his head and said. When the followers of Jun Dingtian heard this, they felt like vomiting blood. Wasn't the source of essence enough for him? How stingy was stingy? Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't even look at them. He turned around and left the hall. The people inside were gnashing their teeth in anger. Good skill, worthy of the rumor of Yi Shiwen. He had just left the hall when suddenly a burst of praise came from the crowd. A man in a luxurious robe walked over with large strides. He held a folding fan in his hand and was tapping it non-stop. He appeared to be quite carefree. Who are you? Yi Shiwen asked. He couldn't feel any hostility from this man, but he was still vigilant. He could feel that this man's strength was so profound that even he felt threatened. I'm Gu Shuriying. The man bowed slightly and said, You're the painting owner? Gu Shuriying? Yi Shiwen suddenly remembered. Countless heroes had risen in the last few hundred years, and countless heroes had also fallen. Among them, those whose names had shaken the world and had left a deep impression on Yi Shiwen. They were undoubtedly the best of the best. The painting owner, Gu Shuriying, was one of them. He even had his own exclusive title, which was not something ordinary people could do. Although the masters of the Sage Realm were known as the Lord God, in fact, those who could have their own exclusive title were basically invincible figures at the peak of the Sage Realm. Not everyone was qualified to have their own exclusive title. Being able to have a well-known title also represented the public's recognition of this person. And among these masters, the painting owner, Gu Shuriying, was the most special one. He was famous for his poems and paintings, but his strength was also unfathomable. His origin was also very mysterious. It was said that he came from an ancient sect and expert of the Confucian sect. However, although the Confucian sect scriptures were passed down through the ages, very few of its successors appeared. Although there were many people who cultivated the Confucian sect scriptures, they didn't have a proper foundation. At best, they could only obtain a few cultivation techniques. It was a completely different concept from a pure descendant like Gu Shuriying. I didn't expect that you, the number one person of the generation, would have heard of me, Gu Shuriying said with a smile. There was a hint of pride on his face. If it was just an ordinary person who had heard of his name, he might not feel anything at all. However, this person was Yi Shiwen, who had always been known as the number one person of the generation. What number one person? It's just a rumor. I'm afraid that many people will disdain it. But who doesn't know the name of the painting master? Who doesn't know about you? Yi Shiwen indifferently said. Rumors? I'm afraid those who said it was just a rumor would not think so if they saw the scene just now. Gu Shuriying shook his head and said with a smile, Although I'm not talented, not everyone is qualified to enter my eyes. Brother Yi, you don't have to be modest. Although Gu Shuriying's words were polite, in fact, he had his own pride. In this generation, he was definitely one of the few people. Let's not talk about these polite words. May I know why Brother Gu is here? Yi Shiwen asked. It's very simple. I want to form an alliance with you. Gu Shuriying gently tapped the folding fan in his palm and said in an extremely leisurely manner. It was just that when he said this, the surrounding space distorted. Although the two seemed to be still in the same place. In fact, they were separated by a lot of space. Obviously, he did not want to be heard by others. In the eyes of outsiders, the two figures became blurred. Even the lip-reading technique could not tell what the two said. Many people were extremely curious. Painting owner Gu Shuriying, why is she looking for Yi Shiwen? These two people, as far as I know, don't seem to have any intersection. What do they talk about? Yi Shiwen frowned. He also noticed the distortion of the surrounding space, but he was not surprised. He just said, I don't know why Brother Gu wants to join forces with me. Because we have the foundation to join forces. That is, we don't deal with Jun Dingtian, right? Gu Shuriying said with a faint smile. Yi Shiwen was not moved and continued to say, Brother Gu, why do you have a grudge against him? What's so strange about it? Jun Dingtian is an overbearing person. Everyone knows about the grudge between me and him. Brother Yi, you don't have to doubt this. You will find out after a little investigation, Gu Shuriying said. He could see Yi Shiwen's concerns. He was afraid that this was a trap set by Jun Dingtian to lure him into it. If that's all, then there's no need to form an alliance. If I want to kill him, he can't escape, Yi Shiwen said lightly. His words were filled with absolute confidence. Even if his opponent was the world-famous Jun Dingtian, he would not be moved. Gu Shiring shook his head and said, Brother Yi, it's good to have such confidence. But do you think that our opponents are only people like Jun Dingtian? In front of those evildoers, we don't have much power to fight back. As far as I know, you have already offended Wu Zimo. When Wu Zimo comes looking for trouble, I'm afraid it will be troublesome. You want to join forces with me to deal with those evildoers? Yi Shiwen was slightly moved. If it was against those evildoers, then there was a possibility of joining forces. It's not really a fight. It's just a fight for self-defense. Gu Shiring shook his head and said, no matter how arrogant he was not so arrogant to think that he could fight against those world-famous evildoers. Of course, the previous reason is only one of them. There are two real reasons. First, it's because you are strong enough. I don't associate myself with mediocre people. Gu Shiring affirmed Yi Shiwen's strength. Secondly, I trust Brother Ye's character. Are you so sure? Yi Shiwen said, amused. Because Meng Haoran is my disciple, Gu Shiring said. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood. It turned out that Gu Shiring was actually Meng Haoran's master. He and Meng Haoran were old acquaintances. That somewhat stubborn Confucian scholar had left a very deep impression on him. It turned out that there was such a fate. He was sighing with emotion. Gu Shiring opposite him was also feeling the same. Originally, this junior could only associate with his disciple. Now, he was on an equal footing with him. The world was unpredictable. Even the craziest person would not have dared to make such a prediction 2,000 years ago. His disciple was still in a life-and-death training in order to become a god. But Yi Shiwen could already be on an equal footing with him. Such a person was indeed not an ordinary person. So that's how it is. No wonder. Yi Shiwen nodded in understanding. Since you are Meng Haoran's master, then we are not strangers. I can join hands with you. However, I have a lot of troubles. So, you will also have a lot of troubles if you join hands with me. Huh? Gu Shiring laughed loudly. You and I are cultivators. We fight against the heavens, the earth, and people. A little trouble is nothing to be afraid of. Even I have a lot of enemies. It's just the same to each other. Well, if that's the case, then I will join forces with you. Yi Shiwen nodded heavily. Although he didn't care, one more friend meant one more path. There was no need to offend everyone. Then I will give you a piece of news about Jun Dingtian. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.